Lord have mercy on my soul, and Mom's soul, and Dad's soul, and Maggie's soul, and let every soul in Christendom...
Bart!
I can't take this anymore. I want my soul, and I want it now!
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans, brought to you by thatshelf.com. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpson joke came from. Regardless, each week we pick one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, Adam Scholes, and joining me as always is the Neil to my Pepe, my co-host, Nate Storing. Does that make me Cheech or Chong?
I couldn't tell you which one's Neil and which one's Pepe.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm fine with it either way, but I think Tommy Chong is technically a Canadian, so does that, although a Canadian living in America, so maybe you need to be? I don't know, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm the shorter one, probably. I think you're the taller one.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't even know which one's which between Cheech and Chong, to be honest.
Cheech is the short one, Chong is the tall one.
Okay, so I'm more of a Cheech, I think.
Yeah, Chong is the one who was on that 70s show.
Okay.
He's Leo on that 70s show.
Yeah.
We're not talking...
that has to be you.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, well, anyway, this week we watched Martin Scorsese's After Hours, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Which you might remember from such Simpsons episodes as Season 7's Bart Sells His Soul. That's my little nod to Lisa. Bless Mom's soul, and Dad's soul, and Maggie's soul.
Bart's soul.
Also, you might remember it from season 36 because this past season, they did a pretty, I would say, argue like a deeper parody of this film, but
yes, more faithful for sure.
Yes, but that's outside of the scope of our podcast, so we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's dig right into Bart Sells His Soul, Season 7, Episode 4, original air date October 8th, 1995, almost exactly 10 years after the release of this movie. Directed by Wes Archer and written by Greg Daniels, who is, I think, probably at this point best known as being the co-creator and showrunner of the U.S. remake of The Office, and I think co-creator of Parks and Rec. That whole mockumentary style, it really became his thing.
And between The Simpsons and that, he did King of the Hill too, which is like not nothing.
Right?
So,
another sort of like 90s animation classic.
Yeah, pretty impressive guy. I did not realize that he was Conan O'Brien's writing partner.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, at the very beginning of his career, they were writing together on like sketch comedy shows.
Oh.
And they both were at SNL before they came to The Simpsons. And so like Daniels leaves SNL in 1990, O'Brien leaves it the following year, and then Conan joins the Simpsons staff immediately in 1991.
Okay.
And then eventually Daniels joins the staff in 1993, just as Conan is leaving to start his show.
Interesting. Okay.
So like there's this sort of like daisy chain of their careers, which is pretty fascinating. Two very influential people.
Well, I think the thing that I want to just like put out there from the get-go, I texted this to Nate after watching the episode. I know we have the running joke of, this is in my top 10. I don't think I would ever have thought to put this in my top 10.
Yeah.
And I still might not put it in my top 10 of like top 10 favorite episodes.
Sure.
But I think I can definitively say that this is a perfect episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
At least from the way that we like our episodes and how we look at our episodes. I think this episode has every single thing I'm looking for in a Simpson episode. It's got a good story. It's got a good B story that has nothing to do with the main plot. It's got... like the pound for pound joke ratio is through the roof.
Yep.
And it also has like this incredible heartfelt story at its core. As I was watching it, I was marveling at how perfect an episode this is. I think it's probably the first episode we've covered where I'm like, I got no notes. There's no, like, I would like, it's perfect. I genuinely think it's perfect.
It's a perfect example of like a season 7-8 episode of the Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein era, in the sense that it's like, there are movie parodies, But it's not like the most dense movie parody episode. There's sort of a childhood experience at the center of the story. Like on the commentary, I think Greg Daniels talks about some bully at school like sold his soul to him, and then he got so freaked out by it that Greg Daniels sort of like felt badly and like gave it back or something like that. Right. But it's like coming from this like personal story, and I feel like under Oakley and Weinstein, there's more of that in the show, and it feels very like honest and very childlike, which I really, really like. And then some good parodies in there for good measure.
But it also has this sort of like existential element to it that like as a kid you maybe don't appreciate, but as an adult, like it's layered, it's funny, the Uncle Moe's Family Feedbag is so one of the funniest things the show has ever done.
If you like good food, good fun, and a whole lot of crazy crap on the walls, then come on down to Uncle Moe's Family Feedbag.
Come to Uncle Moe's for family fun. It's good, 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 good.
I mean, any chance you get to play with Moe and put Moe out of his comfort zone is chef's kiss.
Okay, so question, did you go to restaurants like that?
100% we did.
Okay, like what restaurant did you go to?
Where I grew up, and I know that it wasn't like a local place because there was also one in Peterborough where my grandparents lived. It was called Bellamy's, and it was
I've never heard
this sort of classic Canadian. They would be classified as quote unquote bar and grill.
Sure.
Or Roadhouse. Like we have Kelsey's,
right.
Jack Astor's, I think. Well, Jack Astor's was sort of in this line at that period.
Yes.
Oh, Applebee's, I think would be sort of like the American equivalent, or like a TGI Fridays.
Yeah.
But our family, we would go out for dinner every Friday, which is, thinking about it now, is just like unfathomable in today's day and age. But yeah, because it was my mom's night off and she didn't have to cook. So we would go out for dinner, and then I would go to Blockbuster and I'd rent my movies and video games for the weekend. But we sort of rotated between like this Bellamy's place. Later on, Applebee's went into the rotation. The place that we mostly went to was Eastside Mario's, which is that sort of like family restaurant, but like the theming there was less this sort of cacophonous throw everything at the wall, and was very much like east side of New York.
Well, this is the thing. There is like a subgenre of Canadian restaurants that are like America-themed restaurants.
Yes.
And Eastside Mario's is like one of those restaurants where it's like, it's New York themed. I feel like it's maybe the logo is like a Statue of Liberty with
it's
like
a statue
tomato.
A Statue of Liberty holding a tomato.
Perfect. A+.
And it's got bottomless. It was sort of the Canadian equivalent of Olive Garden. It was like you got unlimited breadsticks, unlimited salad, and like shitty pasta.
Yeah. Exactly. We didn't really go to these restaurants, and I feel like because of that, I've developed a bit of like a chip on my shoulder about family restaurants. I like to call them Thai chicken salad restaurants.
Yes, exactly.
Because that there's sort of like a subgenre of restaurant, and if that has a Thai chicken salad on the menu, and that's how you know it's like that kind of restaurant.
Yeah. Although I would say in the 90s, Thai chicken salad was definitely not on there, but there would have been, some sort of equivalent of like, this feels exotic, but it's actually like pretty pedestrian. And,
right, exactly, accessible.
But I mean, so again, like Uncle Moe's Family Feedbag definitely is in that sort of like bar and grill, kitschy sort of, let's have a dumb gimmick.
Yeah. It seems very TGI Fridays coded. Like, I think the uniform with the red and white stripes, I feel like, is maybe a TGI Fridays thing and that kind of stuff. Which is interesting because it was like, it started as a singles bar and then turned into a family restaurant.
Really? I see. I didn't know this. I've only been to TGI Fridays once. The second time I ever went to New York, and I went with my now wife, then girlfriend, and my mother-in-law. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
This is what that is.
So the story there is, so the guy who started TGI Fridays says that the movie Cocktail was based on his life.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's actually true, but he claims this.
Interesting.
And so, like he supposedly invented the idea of a singles bar.
Right.
Because bars were kind of like these like depressing places where, men hung out together, basically.
Right.
And so it's like, what if young men and young women could meet at the bar and there could be like fun cocktails? So it started as that and then evolved into and what if the place with the fun cocktails also was family friendly?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there you go.
So there you go. But yeah, that was I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, like researching the history of all of this because they kind of mention it on the commentary as being like a trend at the time, like just the explosion of all these family restaurants that like in the car when the Hibbert family is talking about where to go
through all of them.
All right, where would you kids like to eat tonight?
The spaghetti laboratory.
Face stuffers.
Professor P.J. Cornucopia's Fantastic Foodmagorium and Great American Steakery.
Yeah, they're running through all of them and they're all kind of like, riffs on like the Spaghetti Factory and Applebee's.
I feel like that was also a place that we spent a lot of time in high school because, again, it was like you could get the like free bottomless salads or whatever, and it was just an easy place to meet up, and you couldn't drink, so it was like, where else are you going to go?
Yumi and our friend Alex used to go to movies and go to Applebee's. That was a classic pairing. Yeah,
a classic pairing.
Lots of Saw movies, as I recall.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Nate, so let's talk about the reference, because I mean, when I literally did have to text you and be like, what episode are we doing with After Hours? Because it's not like anything immediately came to mind. So talk us through the quote-unquote After Hours reference.
Right. So this kind of comes near the tail end of this episode when Bart has like fully gone crazy after like feeling like he's actually sold his soul and nothing's kind of going according to plan and he's not able to enjoy life anymore and all that sort of stuff. And so like he is trying to track down Milhouse and he finds himself like in this kind of weird part of Springfield. Every once in a while Springfield like transforms into like, some kind of like previous era of New York. I guess it's sort of like parodying Soho in this movie. So it's like nighttime and there's like street lights and these kind of like rundown buildings and stuff and weird characters. And he looks at a map and he says,
Okay. Milhouse's grandmother lives on 257th Street and I'm on 3rd. No.
That's sort of the plot of this movie, which is like he's downtown and he needs to get uptown, right? Do you have the street cleaner that comes by and runs over his bike? Which is a great
gag. Comes out
cleaner?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it comes out clean, and then he's like, oh, great, finally a stroke of luck, and he gets on it and it completely falls apart. And then you have, like, the raving derelict, who has that great speech where you can kind of make out him saying, like, Hitchcock stole every idea I ever had.
Slow down. Get out of there. Hitchcock stole every idea I ever had. He came into my room. Who's been stealing your thoughts? And they put everything.
Yes, that's pretty good. But, like, just that whole vibe. It's nighttime. You're in kind of a weird part of town. You have to get somewhere far away, and there's all these weird people around. That's After Hours. They call it out on the commentary as saying, like, this is supposed to be kind of an After Hours thing, right?
Okay, I didn't realize that. So it's not just us making a wild
they say
leap.
it on the commentary, so it's got some level of endorsement. Although every once in a while, someone on the commentary is like, I don't know, this is kind of like that movie. But I'm pretty sure this one seems a little bit more solid than that. Even though I would say it's more of like a spiritual thing, and less of a like, this shot is from the movie or this character's from the movie. It's much more like it's just a vibe, right?
Totally.
That goes on for a few minutes in this episode.
Yeah, even Milhouse's grandmother's apartment kind of has that sort of like 80s New York apartment vibe.
Right. They're all kind of like sleeping in one room.
It also gives us a great moment where Milhouse's dad, and I feel like this is another Nate Storingism, like you used to do the shut up. I feel like you used to do that a lot when you would get frustrated with one of us.
That sounds right. I believe that.
So
there is one moment like in this sequence that is a bit of a mystery reference, but I want to jump ahead to it just because it was like, it's something I tried to track down forever and couldn't figure out, which is when Bart shows up and Chief Wiggum is dealing with the derelict and Ralph's in the car and Bart comes over to the car and is talking to Ralph and starts like trying to badger him for his soul. And then Chief Wiggum comes back and shines a light in his face and his eyes kind of turn into like snake eyes or cat eyes.
Yep.
And I was like, this has got to be, it's so weird and out of the usual tone of the show that it feels like it's got to be something, but I can't figure it out. And so I was thinking maybe it's an American Werewolf in London. And I started looking for clips of that. Couldn't find anything that quite fit the bill, but it's got a bit of that vibe of like the climax of the movie where he goes to the movie theater and then he comes out and there's like that confrontation. I was also thinking maybe it's Thriller. There's a bit of that going on, but I couldn't couldn't really pin it down.
Yeah, so. I had that written down as one of my mystery references, and I thought that for whatever reason, because it's very cat-like, which of course Thriller famously has a werecat, not a werewolf.
Right.
And I also was thinking about there's this Paul Schrader movie called Cat People. That's like an erotic thriller, but I don't think there's any I don't think someone actually turns into a cat person. I don't know, but it's also Paul Schrader, so it's also very possible that there is someone who turns into a cat person, but I don't know.
I'm just thinking of The Termizer, an erotic thriller. Cat People, an erotic thriller.
Yeah, I mean, look at the poster; it's very sexy. But
really,
yeah, Cat People movie. Yeah, it's. Now we're going off on a tangent.
Oh, wow.
But in the poster, the girl has cat eyes. Yeah. But I don't know that she ever hisses. So
maybe.
I don't know. But
something's going on.
Something's going on. It definitely feels like it must be a reference to something and we just haven't clocked it yet. But it's one of those Simpson mystery references where it feels hyper specific, but not specific enough that we've been able to figure out what it is.
Right. One of the other movies that's recommended if you like After Hours is Vampire's Kiss, which I think is written by the same guy.
Okay.
And it's that could also be there's just a bunch of kind of you're in a city and there's monster people sort of movies that it could be. So maybe one day we'll crack that one, but anyway.
Yeah, well, maybe Greg Daniels has the answer, and we'll get him on the record. I mean, you alluded to this already, Nate, but this is another sort of parody heavy, but in the sort of Oakley and Weinstein ways, where they're all sort of just little beats or little moments. It's not full on plot elements or anything like that. So, what are some of the other movies that you clocked?
Right. There's a reference to Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, believe it or not. So in Bart's dream, at one point, there's a piggyback fight between Dolph and Jimbo. And Jimbo says, "I'm Master Blaster," which is a reference to the two guys in that movie where it's a little guy being held up by a big guy. That's Master Blaster. One of them's Master, one of them's Blaster.
That's the one Mad Max movie I haven't yet seen. I've seen all the others.
It's pretty fun.
So, yeah, it's the one we've seen at Turner, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I know people are fond of it. So
yeah, totally. So obviously the Itchy and Scratchy episode in this is called Skinless in Seattle, which is a reference to Sleepless in Seattle. But I actually think the plot of that episode is also kind of a reference to that movie. So have you seen that movie?
I have seen that movie, not in many years. It's not my favorite of the Nora Ephron movies. So we watched it one year and I don't think I watched it since, but.
So, despite the fact that it's called Sleepless in Seattle, the conclusion of that movie takes place in New York.
Well, of course.
Right, where they meet at the top of the Empire State Building.
Yes.
And so the idea of Scratchy's coming to meet his love at the Space Needle in Seattle, I think is kind of we're referencing the movie, but it's a shortcut because we can't put the Empire State Building in the cartoon because then everyone will be why are they referencing Seattle when it's New York?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a shortcut to reference the movie a little bit.
Totally.
Okay. Citizen Kane, of course. So on the wall of Moe's family, or what is it? Uncle Moe's family feedbag, you will see the Rosebud sled. So
I missed that.
A bit of a spoiler.
I was distracted by the crocodile with a hat.
That's fair. There's a lot of crap on that wall. Okay, this one is maybe a little bit of a stretch. But
I also wrote it down, so I feel like we're both thinking the same thing. So.
Yeah. So when Bart first tries to track down Milhouse, he shows up at his house, and a guy in a spacesuit opens the door, basically, and tells him that he's in danger and he must leave, right? And I'm pretty sure that is a reference to E.T.
Yeah, that immediately I was like, is this an E.T. reference?
Yeah.
Because it's such an iconic image from that movie. A movie which I don't really like and haven't seen in many years because I don't really like it. Yeah. But that's one of the indelible memories is those guys in the spacesuits.
I avoided that movie for years because I found it really scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And it was mostly that stuff and then all the stuff where E.T. dies and they're in the weird medical tents and stuff. I hated that as a kid.
Same here, man.
I rewatched it recently and I was like, oh, I get it. I was feeling like Elliot was feeling, where Elliot was like, you're killing him. And I was like, these adults are killing E.T., right? It's scary. So anyway, but I'm pretty sure that is actually a reference to E.T.
Yeah.
This is like one of those borderline ones as well. But Alf, of course, right? You get the Alf Pogs.
He's back in Pog
He's back in Pog form. And there was an Alf TV movie. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, me neither. One thing I'm realizing is there are a lot of TV movies of like sitcoms and other stuff over the years. And Alf did indeed have at least one TV movie. Interestingly, Alf had been off the air for 5 years at this point.
Oh, I was going to say, like, maybe it was a backdoor pilot situation, but no. Okay.
No.
It was a straight up bring him back.
Right, because I think maybe Al Jean and Mike Reiss worked on Alf.
I believe that's true, yes.
So it's probably a little bit of a nod to that. Like, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Okay, here's a fun one that I did not pick up until a recent rewatch. So when Milhouse is playing with Bart's soul in the backyard, right? And Bart comes back. Milhouse goes, yes.
Yes.
He does the Frank Nelson thing. And this is 3 seasons before the appearance of the Yes Guy.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So he doesn't appear until Married to the Mob in season 10. But Milhouse is sort of like doing the Frank Nelson thing. So that character has sort of existed for a long time in like radio and TV and all of that. But he does make an appearance in that role, more or less, in a movie called The Milkman, which is his best known like film appearance, Frank Nelson. So I gave it to that, but you know, it's kind of one of those amorphous, like he's a character that transcends several different media and shows and all of that. So yeah, The Milkman. All right. Mystery references. There's an inflatable sponge T-Rex in this episode that Bart sort of imagines attacking Lisa. What do you think the sound from that T-Rex is? Is it a reference to a movie? Is it just a generic roar sound? Because I feel like I've seen it online sort of attributed to different movies, but it could also be nothing.
In my mind, I feel like I remember it sounding more like Godzilla's roar than anything else.
So that's the thing, is like online, I've seen both that and Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I don't think it's Jurassic Park because like that one feels so, at least the one that I'm thinking of, the famous roar sequence, is like so guttural and like rumbly and like, I mean, maybe it's meant to be a reference to that sequence of the T-Rex coming to life in Jurassic Park, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like in my mind, what I'm hearing in my head right now is closer to that sort of like 70s Godzilla sound effect.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It sounds neither here nor there for me, but it could also be like one of the lesser used roars from Jurassic Park or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one of the Toho sounds. Those are very distinctive. Like when you hear them like directly and do a comparison, it's like they have like a very, very specific
But I also don't think that they would have used... One would have to assume that Jurassic Park is using, like, they're not using library sounds for that movie, right?
No. It's all customly created.
Whereas I imagine the Simpsons are probably mostly pulling from like libraries.
Yeah.
Again,
every once in a while they cheat a little bit, and they say on the commentary when they're cheating a little bit, where they're like, we just.
And the sound in this episode is very good. One of my notes is the detail of when Bart and Milhouse are cleaning the pipes, and every time they let go of the metal stick, it sort of like has that like I can't replicate it, but listen for it when you go back and watch it. And it's just these little details. And of course, Lisa has her footsteps in this one where nobody else has footsteps, but Lisa always does. It's just there's of course when the T-Rex is squishing her and she's like, help, it's
funny smelling water.
But there's like this like sponge sound, like again, it's just these little details that I do love, which again contribute to why it's a perfect episode. But I don't know that it is the like Jurassic Park sound, but it's probably, it's certainly a nod to that.
Seems like it, maybe. Okay, what about the city in Bart's dream?
It's funny that you wrote it down, because when I was watching it I was like, oh, that looks like the Emerald City, or like a futuristic riff on the Emerald City.
Yeah, it feels a bit like the After Hours reference in this, right? Which we know is a true reference, or, at least it's called out on the commentary, where it's like, it's almost like they did it from memory.
Yeah.
Bit, where they're sort of like, yeah, it's kind of like a Wizard of Oz thing. Like in the script, maybe it's like an Emerald City is on the horizon, right? And so it's like we all kind of know what that is. And it's like clearly a very clustered city that's green, you know, that they're all going towards. So that certainly reads as Emerald City. But yeah, when you look at the design of it, it doesn't look anything like, you know, the Emerald City in the movie. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to say exactly, but it definitely feels like it's riffing on it to me. Okay. When Bart leaves the restaurant and Homer is like, you didn't finish your dinner. And then his brain's like, stop, you fool. He like corrects himself by going, run, boy, run for your life. Reference to Forrest Gump or not?
I'm going to say no. I think that might be a bit of a stretch, but I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, I think this is one that may be claimed online somewhere.
Right.
But I think I tend to agree. It doesn't really feel specific enough. And it's not like there's no there. There's nothing that you're taking away from that parody that's kind of like fun or interesting or like, I don't know. So I think I'm going to say no to that one too.
Yeah.
Okay. The music in Bart's dream sequence. It's hard to remember, like, just us talking right here, but it's very distinctive and does definitely feel like, to me, it may be a reference to something. I could not tell you what it is. And this is the problem with the music references, is like some of them are so hard to pin down, but it's probably at least in the style of something.
Yeah, it feels like it could be a nod to some sort of dream sequence from something else, but also it could just be Alf Clausen,
an invention,
doing this is dream music. But yeah, interesting.
It feels very like just the tone of it and everything is so specific, but you never know. I mean, again, it's like they parodied Tucker, A Man in His Dream.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, who the hell knows where the music might have come from?
Totally, that's totally.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, are there any other things that you just like love that you want to call out about this episode? A perfect episode, as you've said.
I mean, again, this place smells like tinkle. Thank you, door. Way to breathe, no breath. Like, there's just so many great lines in this. It got to the introduction of like Uncle Moe's Family Feedbag. And I was like, oh my God, this is the Uncle Moe's Family Feedbag episode.
Yes.
Which is, again, it's one of these funny things of like, as I said, it's a B plot that has absolutely nothing to do with the A plot. So it could have been in any episode, but it's such a memorable B plot that like, that lives in my memory. You know, there's the dank.
You ain't thinking of getting rid of the dank, are you, Mo?
Maybe I am.
Oh, but Mo, the dank.
I referenced it recently in one of my group chats with friends. That's you. And it's Mr. Stinky. You got the stink lines and everything. It's just like, there's just, this is one of those episodes where like the cultural impact it had on me is long lasting. I do want to also just shout out two things. One, I love the line of souls aren't real. That's a thing that's made up to scare little kids like the Boogeyman or Michael Jackson.
Yes.
Obviously, I have to reference that. And then also, I really want to call out Lisa's arc in this because she goes from being a real stinker. She's so mean to Bart. We sort of referenced the mom's soul and dad's soul.
Right.
Like, she's really laying it on thick. And then, obviously, at the end, when another incredible performance from Nancy Cartwright, when Bart's sort of breaking down, praying for his soul back. And then, you know, Lisa obviously is the one who bought it, which is this lovely little button on the episode. And again, is what makes this such a perfect episode, the heart there. But then the only other thing I got to call it is secret hobo spices. I want to know what those secret hobo spices are.
Yes. He starts with the best part of the chicken, the neck.
Yes. I really hope that Binging with Babish one day covers what secret hobo spices are. Maybe he already has. I don't know.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, pretty much like that whole B plot is so funny from front to back. And it balances out so perfectly because you have this kind of like a little bit creepy, a little bit heartfelt A plot, and then just like a gag machine as the B plot.
Exactly.
It's such a great balance. Okay.
Can you take the basket off my head, kid? These are really hot.
Yes, $1 Million Birthday Fries is probably the peak of that whole. It's a great runner in the.
Mo gets so excited when you order his $1 Million Birthday Fries, he just has to celebrate.
Here you go. here I am. Uncle Mo, thank you, ma'am. This'll be a treat. Uncle Mo, here I am while you eat. Please take the fries off my head, kid. The basket is extremely hot.
There you go, eat them.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's so... And again, if you've ever been to one of these restaurants that...
Yes.
I guess we alluded to it earlier, but when this was our sort of running gag in high school, in the sort of last year, we would go out for dinner with our friend Alex after going to see a movie. And the gag was whoever goes to the bathroom first, it's going to end up being their birthday.
Yes, I forgot about that.
And it was this, but it got to the point where the restaurant started to be like, they started to become aware that we were doing this and we're not okay with it. But like, what can they do? They can't deny you saying it's your birthday,
right?
And bringing you the free birthday thing with the song. But it sort of got to the point where they were being like, Uncle Mo, like, it's your birthday, here you go. Like, we're not going to do the full song because we know you're just being dumb teenagers taking advantage of us. So, that
Applebee's.
Yeah, that'll always live forever in my memory as like... And like we would normally do it to Alex because she had a very small bladder and she would get very angry with us.
Well, yeah, she hated it, as I recall, kind of being the center of attention.
Exactly. So, which made it that much funnier.
Yeah, of course. That just guaranteed we'd want to do it again.
Yeah. So that is just a fond memory for me of just torturing this poor girl by tricking the Applebee's employees into thinking that it was her birthday. I mean, you got a free birthday blondie. Like, what's not to love?
Yeah, and it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, so.
Okay, my favorite part of this, or what, all the things you said, but also this has one of my favorite openings of any Simpsons episode, which is basically just like this cold open of Bart tricking the entire congregation at the church into singing In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly.
And now, please rise for our opening hymn, The Garden of Eden by Iron Butterfly.
I noticed a goof this time.
Oh, okay.
So when Reverend Lovejoy holds up the sheet music, it actually says In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and Iron Butterfly.
I noticed that, but he says In the Garden of Eden by Iron Butterfly. Yes.
It's funny so another sort of high school story. I remember I learned about that song from this episode, not really understanding what it was.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
And then I burned a CD at one point that had that song on it, and I lent it to this character in our grade, and I remember he stole it from me because he liked... he got so into In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and wanted a copy that he stole this like burned CD from me, and I never got it back.
There you go.
But yeah,
it's a good song.
It's a good song.
That's the thing. That's the thing about this sequence is that it's as a kid I didn't get the joke, which is
me neither.
It's obviously not a hymn, and it's a really long song, right? But it's so well produced. Like, it sounds really good in this episode. Like the organ is great. The voices sound great. Like, it's actually, and it's really like nicely shot and edited. Like, it's a great musical sequence in the show. Yeah. And like, that just is like the production value.
Again, it's a perfect joke in a perfect episode that just like, it's the joke that keeps on giving, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. One other thing about this episode that I hadn't really thought about till I rewatched it. Why the hell does Comic Book Guy want to buy a little boy's soul?
I was going to say, like, we at some point are going to have to unpack Comic Book Guy because, like, what a bizarre, like, I think we kind of take it for granted at this point, but like when you really think about who that character is and like what he's gotten up to in Springfield, but also like he happens to own like an Action Comics #1 that Homer eventually eats in an episode. It's just like there's so much to unpack there. But yeah, that is weirdly disturbing that he bought a 10-year-old soul from another 10-year-old.
Well, when we finally do like Saboteur or Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and we do like what is it, 3 Boys in a Comic Book or 3 Men in a Comic Book, then we'll finally unpack Comic Book Guy in greater detail, I suppose. I did want to call out the season 36 episode briefly. Just it's interesting that they did kind of return to this. By the time we air this, we will have had a conversation with Matt Selman about this episode and about this season, but we haven't yet. So all I can say is in an interview that he did with Animation Scoop, he sort of talked a little bit about you know, like why they wanted to do this. And basically what he said is like, they're now at this point where they're so established that they can do these like deep dives into micro genres and things that no one cares about basically anymore. And people have kind of forgotten that they even exist. And so this episode, Desperately Seeking Lisa, is sort of like this mashup of Desperately Seeking Susan and After Hours.
Right.
Which is kind of like a micro genre. You know, when I was doing research for this, I actually came across a quote from Jay Hoberman, who's like the Village Voice film critic, and he called them comedies of yuppie angst.
Yes.
Which sort of like came up in the 80s. And you can also like look at like Lost in America or Something Wild as like other examples of this like micro genre. But it just creates such a great world that is a good setting for a story. And I feel like that's really the thing that both Bart Sells His Soul and Desperately Seeking Lisa are kind of honing in on, is just like this feeling of Soho and the art scene and the grittiness of the city and all that stuff, the weirdos that like that is sort of created by this movie.
I think the move that the modern episode does that is the right choice is that it makes it about Lisa as opposed to Bart, because it feels like Lisa is the person who would be sort of sucked into this world. And
totally,
and you know, the famous episode where she wants to go to the museum, like it's established that Lisa's desire for culture can sometimes get the best of her.
Yeah, totally. And like I felt very seen by this latest episode because there are like so many New York references, and some of them are really obvious, and then others are like pretty deep cuts. So like the train that they come in on into the city is a New Jersey Transit train. This is the train that I take into New York City.
Yes.
And like, you know, at one point she goes by this sort of like cube that's standing on its corner, and that's a sculpture where my office used to be.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's I think it's technically called the Alamo, but we always call it the Astor Place Cube. And the cool thing about it is that it actually moves if you touch it. You can push it in one direction and make it spin, but it's kind of like a little New York secret.
There you go.
And then just like all the art references too were like, you know, very up my alley. So I was really digging this episode. And Griffin Dunn, who stars in this movie, actually guest stars.
Yes.
As well. Very briefly, but he plays an actor playing a cockroach in a stage adaptation of The Metamorphosis.
Yes. Which the Metamorphosis has is it The Metamorphosis, or maybe I'm thinking of The Crucible? Damn it, it's in one of the Simpsons commentaries. I can't remember what episode it is, but Al Jean tells the writer to read this play, and I thought it was Metamorphosis, but maybe I am mixing it up and it's The Crucible. And then they read it and they're like, this has nothing to do with the story that we're trying to tell. And he's like, yeah, I just thought you'd like it and it would get you in the right headspace. I think it is Metamorphosis, though. Anyway, it's one of these commentary anecdotes that has lived with me over the years. But
I love that. I love that.
Anyway, hi everyone. It's Adam from the future, the present. Anyway, I'm cutting in because I remembered what the play was. It wasn't Metamorphosis or The Crucible. It was The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But anyway, it's not really relevant to this in any way, shape, or form. But, you know, I don't want to get fired for that blunder. So, yeah, it was The Lottery. And Al Jean told the writers to read it. And then they were like, what does this have to do with anything? And he was like, nothing. It's a good story. At least I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Anyway, back to the episode. Okay, well, Nate, should we then tuck into the film?
Yeah, let's do it. But I'm going to start with a question for you.
Yes.
How would you sum up this movie in a sentence?
Okay. New York yuppie Griffin Dunn has the worst night of his life.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could get a little more granular, I guess, but that is sort of the crux of it. Maybe if I were to do a run-on sentence, New York yuppie Griffin Dunn goes on a date that results in the worst night of his life.
Sure. I feel like you're missing maybe a little bit of the world of Soho stuff.
Yeah,
but you know, but
again, it's
okay.
like it's tough to sort of
teaser.
Yeah. Well, how if I were a professional home video box art writer, how would I sum this up, Nate? Where did you pull this from?
So I pulled this from the 1986 VHS, which is interesting because we're like at the point now where, you know, the movie actually like was released on home media immediately after its release. We're still in like peak rental VHS period, I feel like. And
this has to be the most 80s VHS I've ever seen. Yes. Holy crap. Yeah, okay. Well, from the 1986 VHS release of Martin Scorsese's After Hours, buttoned up, buttoned down word processor Paul Hackett is looking for a break from his humdum Manhattan routine. I'm doing this like an 80s trailer voice, just if that wasn't clear. Full of hope and goodwill, he heads to Soho for a late-night date with Marcy, a pretty girl he scarcely knows. Poor Paul. No one's ever told him that when it's after hours, different rules apply. Martin Scorsese, the celebrated, distinctly New York filmmaker whose Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, New York, New York, and The King of Comedy and other works established him as the Big Apple's premier film chronicler, now takes a darkly comic look at his favorite city in a wild and woolly free-for-all. Woolly, there's an adjective you don't hear since the 80s. The descent down the urban rabbit hole begins when Paul, Griffin Dunn, en route to Soho, watches his money fly irretrievably out of a taxi window. It's a sign of things to come because he gradually gets caught in a bizarre web of seemingly chance encounters with the loopy, loony downtown night people, brought to life by a terrific all-star cast including Desperately Seeking Susan's Rosanna Arquette, Tootsie's Terry Garr, and the outrageous comedy team of Cheech and Chong. But the random events of Joseph Minion's ingenious script turn out to be related in startling, humorous ways. Ooh. Notice that Catherine O'Hara doesn't get a call out there. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's because she had not done anything except for Canadian productions before. Yes, exactly. She was unknown at that time. Well, it's funny because I noticed that it features both of Kevin's parents from Home Alone are in this movie. Prior to, you know, I think Home Alone is probably what solidifies Catherine O'Hara in America. Well, although I guess maybe Beetlejuice is before that. Beetlejuice is before that. Yeah, so I guess Beetlejuice sort of would have been maybe her breakout role. But But yeah, anyway. Although being in a Martin Scorsese movie is probably not nothing, even though this was not like a huge hit, but it was like a decent hit, you know? Yeah, for sure. Well, what's your relationship with this movie? Had you seen this prior to us unpacking it for the show? No, I had not seen this and would not say that I even watched this episode originally and was like, oh, that's a movie reference, but I don't get it. You wouldn't necessarily know until you listen to the commentary. Right. So I actually feel like my biggest relationship to this movie is probably the poster. Right. I remember seeing that poster around for ages and ages. So like clock or the watch with like his head twisted over top of it with the woman's fingers, on his head. Like it's such a distinctive poster that's always been my association with this movie. But I didn't know almost anything about it until recently. It's a great poster, but I would say also like really... Well, we're going to get into this, but I don't think really matches the tone of this movie. That's interesting. I think it's perfect. Okay, interesting. Well, we're going to get into it, I'm sure. Yeah. What about you, Adam? So I had seen this movie before. It was when I was working on a show. I saw it probably like 10 years ago for the first time. And one of my coworkers said like, oh, this is my favorite Martin Scorsese movie. Like, you have to see this. Wow. And I rented it on iTunes. Because again, it was one of these movies where like it kind of became like hard to find, I think. Right. Like, yes, it got that VHS release and maybe there was a DVD release, but like Criterion ends up putting out the first like Blu-ray of it. So yeah, it was one of these weird underseen Scorsese movies that has like a cult following. And so I rented it thinking that like, oh, great, Martin Scorsese does a comedy. And I did not like it very much, and we'll unpack why, I'm sure. But so that's my relationship with it. I was just like, I'd seen it, didn't love it, was like, okay, cool, like well made. Like, I mean, obviously, like Martin Scorsese, the man knows how to make a movie, but just wasn't really my thing. So when you were saying, oh, let's cover this, I was like, great, I get to revisit this movie. I guess now is probably like this would be the first time we've covered him. Like, what is your relationship with Martin Scorsese? Like, this legendary American filmmaker of New Hollywood. Like, where does he fall in your cinema literature or your cinema knowledge?
Yeah, I'm not sure which movie I first saw of his, now that I think about it, but definitely one of those people that I got into like in the early days of university. Like when we were living together in a dorm, I was like probably buying Martin Scorsese DVDs unseen.
Well, they were, because a lot of them were put out by MGM and were part of that weird, for whatever reason, MGM movies were like the 3 for $30 deal at HMV. So like,
and you're like, I might as well buy it. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't I just buy it? And then
it's cheaper than renting it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so I think I probably first saw Goodfellas, of course, right? But I really love Raging Bull, you know? I've seen a lot of his movies, not so many of his documentaries.
Right.
But you know, definitely someone that I really, really like. I mean, we talked about, I think last year on the podcast, like my number one movie of last year was Killers of the Flower Moon, right?
Right, of course.
Which I thought was really, really great. So, you know, I would say I'm definitely a Martin Scorsese fan. I don't know if I would say he's like my favorite director, but I consistently like his movies. I think I find them, for the most part, an interesting balance of being entertaining, sometimes a bit challenging, you know, and always like really exciting camera work and editing, you know, especially like the sort of montages and his use of music is, of course, very, very exciting. The one movie that I really don't like of his, I've never connected with Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver drives me crazy.
Same here.
I don't know. I don't think I'm into that kind of like provocateur like stance as a director. It just feels kind of edgelordy to me.
Right, totally. Yeah, I mean, Marty's never been one of my guys. My relationship with most of his movies is kind of like my relationship to Apocalypse Now. It's like I appreciate the artistry and I appreciate what he's done for cinema, but like I don't find most of his movies particularly enjoyable. For the longest time, I always said my favorite Scorsese movie was Shutter Island, which we saw together, I believe.
Yeah,
in theaters.
We did.
And like, Goodfellas, I was always like, you know, if I'm going to watch a mob movie, I want to watch Godfather over Goodfellas. I would pick Casino over Goodfellas personally.
Oh, no.
I really like Casino, and I don't know, Goodfellas doesn't really do anything for me.
Wow.
Obviously I appreciate it, and I understand its place in the canon, but it's just I did revisit The Departed last summer and was kind of blown away because I that was one where I saw it when it came out and it didn't have a huge impact on me, but rewatching it I'm like, okay, this movie is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm more of a fan of his sort of like music and music adjacent stuff. I love The Last Waltz, which I ended up watching it again when we talked about Spinal Tap last year.
Yeah, me too.
And I loved it. And then the thing that I think, you know, everybody forgets he directed the music video for Bad, the Michael Jackson song.
That's right. Yes.
Which, like, when you watch it and you know that, and you, especially
like,
if you watch the like full uncut, like 18-minute version,
right,
you're like, oh yeah, this is 100%. This is a Martin Scorsese movie. Like it's got like New York's underground underbelly, but yeah. So he's just, I don't know. Truthfully, I've never seen Raging Bull. It's one of these movies that I'm like, I feel like I want to see in a theater, and it's been sitting there and like there for me to watch. And I remember my dad in high school bought a Martin Scorsese DVD box set, and like Raging Bull was in it. And it was one of these things like I was tempted to watch it and then I didn't. And now I've just sort of been like, feels like one of these things like I owe it to myself to see it properly.
Yeah,
but
it's so different than his other works in some ways, in that it's like this interesting combination of like these super stylized boxing scenes that are really beautiful, I guess you'd say, and then these like hyper realistic dramatic scenes by like incredible actors and actresses, like that are really like brutal and violent and awful. It just has a very clear like thesis in terms of how it's made as a film, as opposed to like, you know, something like Goodfellas, which I just find very dynamic and interesting, but I wouldn't say that it's got like kind of a driving thesis for its aesthetic per se, in the same way that like that movie is like very clear cut of like, this is why this is done this way and this is why this is done that way.
Well, and like I saw The Irishman in theaters and I
I did not enjoy that at all.
But again, I think great filmmakers go to Netflix and make terrible movies. That's my hot take. Yeah. So, but this is the thing. I could also, at the same time, I could sit and listen to Martin Scorsese talk about film for hours.
Absolutely.
I think he's such a dynamic scholar of cinema and a genuinely very funny individual.
Yes.
I love when he appears in movies because I think he is really like, I think he's a great actor, weirdly. I don't know. It's someone that I feel like as a young cinephile or like budding cinephile, everyone was like, oh, you must love Martin Scorsese. And I was sort of like, no. Like, he's just, I liked Hitchcock. I liked Coppola. Yeah. I liked these other guys, but for whatever reason, he was just not one of them. They're not.
Just not your guy.
Not my guy. Not what I would throw on for an enjoyable like Friday night.
Yeah, which I find wild because I find Goodfellas like such a comfort watch, even though its ending is so brutal. But like that first half or whatever, 2/3, where it's just like humming along until, you kind of come down from the high is so, wow.
But it's so funny because you introduced me to Casino and like, you were like, you got to watch this movie. Like, and Sharon Stone's incredible in this movie.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's the thing. I think that movie has more juice to me because it's just like, maybe because it's a stronger, more coherent story because it's not jumping around as much.
Right.
Or I don't know. Yeah, there's just something about that one that I really enjoy.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Goodfellas does have the voiceover, which I feel like could be a factor that may change your perspective on it, I guess, because like can really work for people and sometimes not so much.
Okay, well, enough about Marty's other movies.
Yeah.
How did this one come to be? Because I know it has a bit of an interesting sort of timeline and lineage.
Yeah. So it is interesting because of where everyone's kind of coming from at this point. Okay. So let's start with our screenwriter, actually. So this is written by a guy named Joseph Minion. This is his first screenplay that was produced because he was still a film student at Columbia when this was picked up. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was sort of inspired a bit by Kafka, right? Which is probably why The Simpsons is riffing on that, right?
Yeah.
And like a couple movies I am not familiar with at all. Orson Welles' The Trial. Don't know that.
So that, I haven't seen it. I actually have a copy of it because I've been meaning to watch it. It's got Tony Perkins in it, and I think it's based on a Kafka story. Maybe that's the thing that Al Jean told them to God damn it, it's going to drive me crazy. But yeah, anyway,
maybe.
And the reason I this past summer, I was like, oh, I really want to do a deep dive on like all the Orson Welles movies I haven't seen.
I know. I like all of his movies.
So I started collecting them to sort of like do, 1 week I would just like sit down and watch, and I just haven't gotten around to it.
Sure.
But like, everybody knows Citizen Kane, but it's like Citizen Kane is almost like the anomaly in his filmography. The guy's just an incredible filmmaker. So I was just like, I owe it to myself to see the other stuff. So
yeah, well, since you love After Hours so much, you could check out The Trial next.
Yeah, oh boy.
He was also inspired by Odd Man Out, which is apparently a film noir that's also a One Crazy Night kind of story.
Okay.
But he was most inspired, some might say too inspired, by a radio storyteller named Joe Frank.
Okay.
Whose short story Lies, Minion actually later admitted to accidentally plagiarizing basically in this movie. So like a bunch of very specific details from this movie come from Joe Frank's short story.
Interesting.
Including the plaster of Paris bagel and cream cheese paperweights.
Okay,
so
yeah,
that's specific.
That's, yeah. Talk your way out of that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The money blowing out of the window of the cab and the girl telling the protagonist a story about being raped all come from Joe Frank.
Interesting.
So Frank sued them and they settled the case for $30,000. So anyway, they get the script. Amy Robinson is one of the producers of this movie. She's from Double Play Productions, and she gets the script from actually Minion's professor, who I believe is Dujan Makaveyev. I'm going to say.
That sounds right.
Sure. At the very first Sundance Lab in 1981.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So there's lots of like movie history kind of tied into this. So the other producer on this movie is Griffin Dunn, who also stars in the movie. So Dunn and Robinson originally actually approached a different director with this script. Do you happen to know who that is?
I do. It was, and again, when you talk about like, wow, two diametrically opposed directors, there couldn't more be. But Tim Burton was originally signed on to do this.
That's right. Apparently, they saw Vincent, his short, which only aired before this teen comedy called Tex in 1982, fairly briefly. So they happened to like see this short and were like, that's the guy we want. And so they approached Tim Burton, which I kind of get actually. With the
I was gonna say like you immediately think of like the Tim Burton-y stuff, and you're like, what really? And it's like, but you think about movies like Ed Wood, and you go, oh, okay, actually no, this does kind of fit.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is the thing that's crazy is like they saw a cartoon short and were like, he'd be perfect for this live action movie, which is wild. But then when you think about his very first live action movie, Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure,
right?
It's like totally the same vibe as this, in my opinion. So anyway, they also recruit Terry Garr early on as kind of like their big name in this movie, which is interesting to think about. But they still can't really get any money for the project. So meanwhile, our friend Martin Scorsese has basically hit rock bottom.
Poor guy.
Yeah. In 1978, he almost died due to internal bleeding caused by his drug abuse.
Jeez.
His most recent movie, The King of Comedy, was a total bomb. In fact, Entertainment Tonight called it the movie flop of 1982. He tells this anecdote about watching the TV, and they come on and they're like, after the break, the movie flop of 1982, and it comes back and it's his movie.
Jesus Christ. Again, that is another one that I saw and was like, you got to see this movie. It's one of the funniest movies ever made, and I don't think I laughed once. And I was like,
I don't think that movie's funny, but it is something.
It's something, all right. But yeah.
Dark as hell. So after that bomb, right, he's trying to get The Last Temptation of Christ made. He's like overseas, like doing the pre-production on that, and it gets canceled.
Right.
He's on his way back from Casablanca doing pre-production on the plane. And Amy Robinson, who Scorsese knew because she was in Mean Streets, had sent him this script. And he's sort of like looking through scripts on the plane, and he reads After Hours. And he's like, okay, I think this is a way to pick myself back up from this. Because what he sees is this is like an indie movie. This is like a movie that you could do on a low budget. You don't need big name actors. And the other thing that he recognized was the movie actually takes place a couple blocks away from where he grew up.
Oh, cool.
So he grew up in Little Italy, which is like in the same sort of area of Manhattan. And he had actually just bought a loft in Tribeca, which is also in the same part of the city. So he's like, this is close to home. Like, I know this. It's something I can do easily. And maybe I can kind of get back in touch with my roots with, you know, like movies like Mean Streets. So that's sort of what attracts him to the movie. So basically Dunn and Robinson, once they find out that Scorsese's interested, they go back to Burton and are like, so funny story. And as soon as they mentioned Scorsese's name, apparently Burton was basically like, oh, Martin Scorsese wants to do this movie? Don't worry about it.
Right.
You've got it. It's fine. So he kind of graciously stepped down.
Which is, it's kind of a cool move of him to do that.
Yeah. So. I mean, it's early in his career, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But also, yeah, it's a classy move for sure. In terms of the production of this movie, what Marty sort of set out to do was exactly what happened. It ended up being this very tight production.
Right.
It was a shorter shoot than even Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which I think is his first movie. First feature-length movie, and Taxi Driver. It was 40 days instead of 45 for those two movies.
Wow.
And his bigger movies, which he'd done before this, were 100-day shoots.
Holy crow.
So he's like pulling way, way, way back to make this movie.
Right.
He basically sketched out the whole shot list and everything up front. And he ended up identifying 600 shots that he had to do in those 40 days, which, I'll do the math for you, is 15 setups a day. Right?
Crap.
So, luckily, Dunn and Robinson knew just the guy to make this happen, and that's the DP, Michael Ballhaus.
Okay.
So they'd worked with him on Baby It's You, which is like another movie that they produced. And Scorsese loved the fluidity of Ballhaus's camera work, but also he brought this kind of scrappiness and efficiency because he worked in European cinema. And where they don't have the big budgets, and they are these sort of like smaller productions and all of that kind of thing. So he ended up being kind of the perfect guy for the job. We've, of course, encountered Ballhaus before on the podcast. Bram Stoker's Dracula and also Wild Wild West.
Just get two more diametrically opposed films you couldn't find.
Indeed.
But
I as I recall, maybe he might have been brought on to Wild Wild West to help like fix things. I can't recall.
Yeah, or was he? Or
maybe he was kicked off.
I was gonna say he might have been the one that was fired, but yeah, I can't remember.
One of his kind of cool secrets on this is that he would basically send the gaffer Stefan Chapsky, I think, to pre-light the set 1 or 2 days in advance, so that when he'd get there, he would just have to make little tweaks.
Oh, cool!
But that helped them kind of like move the production forward really quickly.
Yeah.
The other thing that I picked up on from the production notes was just like the vibe of this movie, of this like small, tight-knit New York community of like artists and creatives, was like exactly what the set of this movie was like, it seemed like as well. Right. So the pre-production headquarters was basically Martin Scorsese's apartment
cool.
in Tribeca. Apparently he had over a dozen VCRs that ran 24 hours a day just collecting source material. Because like he would like be collecting all of these like influences that he wanted to pay attention to for making the movie, but he would also create almost like movie mixtapes for the actors.
Cool.
That he would just be like, I'm going to curate these like 5 movies, and this is what I want your performance to be inspired by.
And again, this is why he's the coolest mother out there.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I just like,
amazing.
I have so much respect for this guy, even if I don't love his movies.
Yeah.
Like, he's a nerd. He's like us.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's like us on steroids. The movie references that he's drawing from, like when he starts listing down the influences, I'm like, I don't even know what half this stuff is.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think of myself as not, a movie expert, but just kind of like a fan. And I'm like, God, there's so much more to learn. Composer Howard Shore, who does a pretty cool score for this movie, knew Dunn and Scorsese through his work with David Cronenberg.
Yep.
But he was hired for the score partly because his office was in the same building as the production company.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so they like literally just like walked down the hall and like knocked on his door, and he just like had this lab there where he was experimenting with synthesizers, and apparently he like came out in a lab coat and they had a conversation and they were like, "You're hired. Great."
Perfect.
So, yeah. And then the other like crazy sort of like, man, New York's a small place kind of story is the makeup artists and the stylists rented David Byrne's loft apartment during the shoot.
Jeez.
So they're just like hanging out in David Byrne's apartment. You know, the doorbell would ring and it's like Brian Eno. Or they'd pick up the phone and it's David Bowie.
Wow.
It's like just that kind of stuff is happening. So it's like, as much as this movie is a fantasy, there is also like a grain of truth to it, of just like the way New York aggregates this insane network of people, I guess.
Totally.
Marty was very dedicated to making the set feel like the sort of paranoid vibe of this movie as well. You know, it doesn't hurt that like the entire thing was basically nighttime shoots.
Right.
But the production designer, Townsend, said Scorsese would regularly come to set having not seen what they built.
Jeez.
Because he could just never get the director's ear. And then in retrospect, he was like, I think Martin Scorsese was doing that on purpose so that we would just feel kind of nervous.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. Scorsese himself was also kind of a nervous wreck. So he has asthma, but he's also kind of like hypersensitive, let's say, to like smoke and things like that. He also apparently would not eat anything on set except for food made by his mother.
Yes.
And his mother and father actually both worked on the set. She was making food, and his father was pressing clothing for the wardrobe folks.
And she famously appears in Goodfellas as Joe Pesci's mom.
Yes,
who has the great knife.
And they both appear in this movie too. They're actually they're in the diner, I think, at one point.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I came across this quote from Will Patton, who I believe is one of the actors in this, and he just kind of summed it up nicely by saying, I shot something in the early part of the production, and then I came back to do something else in the last week of shooting, and the cast and crew were like different creatures after having done these consecutive night shoots for several weeks.
Yeah, if you've never done a night shoot, it's kind of hell.
Yeah.
I worked on a show where we essentially did several weeks of night shoots, and because of my role on the show, once we wrapped the night shoot, I then had to stay up offloading the footage. And then it was a travel show, so we would like be wheels up at like 9 a.m. So I basically didn't sleep for a month. Oh. And everybody was at each other's throats by the end of it. It was just awful. It was a horrible. I mean, it was fine, but like I have fond memories of it. But in the moment, it was a horrible experience that I was like, I'm never doing this again. So
yeah, it sounds tough. And they were doing this for 40 days, so
yes, exactly,
pretty rough. So yeah, I mean, this movie did fairly well, right? It was a small budget to begin with, 4.5 million. And the box office ends up being about 10 million. Okay. So, not too shabby.
Again, I think it's one of those movies that develops a cult following and because of home video sort of becomes this other thing.
Right, totally. Dunn sort of pointed out that it really resonated in New York. And like apparently there were sort of lines around the block waiting to see this movie, but maybe not so much elsewhere, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, maybe we'll discuss that. Maybe.
And the movie won Scorsese the Best Director award at Cannes that year.
Okay.
And it basically gave him like the next chapter of his career because he kind of, changed the narrative, right? He'd bounced back from this troubled time, goes on to make like The Color of Money. He's able to resurrect Last Temptation of Christ and then goes on to do many more movies that he's well known for after this. So that's probably the biggest success story of this movie is just changing Marty's career. But Adam, where do you think this falls in the sort of overall box office of 1985?
If it's only making 10 million, I don't think it cracks the 10.
No, it does not. It does not. Any guess on what those 10 might be? 1985.
Well, Return of the Jedi is what, 82, 83? So, but he's making a face. Is no. Return of the Jedi is not in there, right? No. Okay. What's 85? See, it's this tricky era where it's like the 80s all kind of blend together for me because they predate me and like, give me a hint.
So there are a lot of franchises in the top 10.
Oh, okay.
So think of the big franchises of the 80s.
Ghostbusters? Well, it's not really a franchise, but Ghostbusters was 84, but I could also see it sort of like holding on.
Not Ghostbusters.
Okay. But something similar?
Yeah, I would say so. Sci-fi comedy.
Oh, Back to the Future.
Back to the Future is number one.
Okay, yeah, totally. Okay, that makes sense.
What's another genre that the 80s is dominated by?
Teen, like John Hughes movies?
Not so much in the top 10.
Okay. Like a Rambo or a like a Predator type, like a Schwarzenegger movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rambo's not Schwarzenegger.
Well, okay, yes, no, I know, but that's yes.
That
so
type
either
of action movie.
A Stallone or a Schwarzenegger.
Yes, in fact, there are actually two Stallones in the top 10.
Wow, which two?
Rambo: First Blood Part 2.
Which is the third Rambo movie?
No, I think it's the second part. I think it's the second one. It's the one where they're like, oh, like, screw this, like, social commentary Vietnam War stuff. We're just going to make an action
because the first movie is called First Blood, and then the second movie is Rambo First Blood Part 2. Yeah, okay, right. See, this is a total... I do not like these movies that they are a blind spot for me, so I know them only from, like, cultural references, not from having actually watched them. But, okay, yeah, so...
Yes.
So you've got so that means, you got a Rocky movie in there.
You got a Rocky movie. Any guess of which one?
I don't know. It's not going to be Rocky 7, Adrian's Revenge, Rocky 4.
Rocky 4. Good guess.
Oh, okay. There you go. Great.
Indeed. I think that's one of my favorite ones because it's the most outrageous one.
Is that the one with Mr. T or...
No, this is the one with Ivan Drago.
I was going to say, is it Ivan Drago? Yeah. Okay.
Where like Rocky basically ends the Cold War.
Yes, of course. Okay. Yeah.
Great movie. Well, why don't I give you the rest?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1, we have Back to the Future. Number 2, Beverly Hills Cop.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it is that era. The Eddie Murphy era.
Yep. So we got our Rambo, we got our Rocky, then we have Cocoon at number 5.
Okay. Yeah.
Movie I've never seen still.
Me neither.
Actually.
Yeah. Not a big Ron Howard guy.
Yeah. Me neither, really. Number 6, we have Witness, a movie that I stand for.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
I think it's great. Underrated. Number 7, The Goonies.
A classic that again does nothing for me.
Yeah, I never connected with it. I think I missed the boat.
Yeah, exactly. But we have friends who adore that movie. So
I'm sure we do. Number 8, Police Academy 2, their first assignment.
Good.
Great.
Glad that exists.
Yeah, perfect. And number 9, Fletch.
Good movie.
I've not seen Fletch, so
worth checking out. Fairly fun. I mean, you don't love comedies, but like it's like the one good Chevy Chase movie that isn't a National Lampoon movie. But it's fun. I really enjoy that movie.
Okay, and then finally, A View to a Kill.
Okay, the beginning of the end for the Roger Moore era. All right, actually, I think it might be the last of the Roger Moores, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go.
Yeah, that is one of the bat shittier Bond movies. That's the one with Christopher Walken, for those who are not super into the Bond franchise.
Right.
Christopher Walken wants to take over San Francisco by, I think he wants to flood it. It's to make his Silicon Valley. I don't know. It's insane. It's an insane movie.
San Francisco is famously hilly. I think flooding it
dude, I don't remember it doesn't matter. Those plots don't matter. It's just it's got Christopher Walken and Grace Jones as Mayday is his henchwoman.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, but I will say, like, looking at this top 10, like, After Hours really feels indie. Like,
oh yeah. I mean, this is that beginning of the sort of American independent cinema era, right? Like,
or a holdover from the New Hollywood stuff too.
Yeah, but
like it's kind of a weird bridge in like the fallow period between the two. You know?
Yes, it's like New Hollywood. Martin Scorsese is making a American indie film, kind of like it's straddling those two eras, I think. Okay, well, should we get into it?
Let's do it.
So, for context, everyone, Nate logs this on Letterboxd with no review, I might add. So I can't even comment on it. But he logs it 5 stars.
Yep.
The highest you can rate this movie.
Yep.
And I believe you texted me saying, I just watched After Hours. Holy crap, this is so incredibly my shit.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, no, it very much is. And it is so incredibly not mine. And so I said this already. I don't really like this movie, but this is kind of the worst case scenario for this show, because it's like, I didn't like the movie, but it's not because the movie's bad. Like, it's not a bad movie. It's Martin Scorsese. Like, I don't think the man can make a bad movie. Like, it's very well made. And there's nothing inherently wrong with it. I just don't enjoy it. Like, it doesn't resonate with me. And I in my Letterboxd review, one of the things I wrote is like, maybe it's a New York thing. Like, yes, you're from Canada, but like, you spent what, like 10 years living in New York?
Not quite that long, but I spent several years in New York. I still commute into New York for work fairly often.
So like, I think that is maybe part of it, is like, I think this movie, I mean, Griffin Dunn sort of alluded to it, that like the movie did great in New York and didn't do well everywhere else, because I think it really is a very inherently sort of New York story. And I think that's kind of why it doesn't really do anything for me. Like, you know, I obviously lived in Toronto for the better part of 10 years, but Toronto is not New York. And like, there are similarities, but like, there's maybe not that same level of like existential dread of being lost in Toronto that there is lost in New York. Here's the problem I kind of have with it, if I have a problem with it. It's that the conceit doesn't really make sense. And I know that doesn't really matter, because it's also kind of supposed to be this like dark fantasy and it's not real. But it's like, you take a cab, you lose your money, so you're stranded, but you're not really stranded, because you could walk home. Like, it would only take, like, it would take 2 hours, not ideal. And maybe, at 4 a.m. in 1985 New York, maybe that is a very scary walk, but you could do that. Or, and this is why it completely falls apart for me, just take a cab and forget the money again. Like, the whole premise is that you take the cab, you got to where you were going, and then you said, oh, I don't have any money, and the cabbie drives off angry, and then he comes back and yells at you later on in the movie.
Yeah.
But like, what's to stop you from just doing that again? Like, get in another cab, pretend you have money, get home. Oh no, my money flew away. Let me run up to my room and I'll grab some money and give it to you. Boom, movie doesn't happen. So it's just like, it's one of those like,
Well, okay, so just context, though. So in 1985, like, Soho is actually, this is kind of the funny thing, Soho is actually gentrified at this point in 1985. It's like, it's now getting, not fancy, but it's like now things are starting to come back, and it's kind of like celebrities are interested in it and that kind of thing. They actually had to shoot it in different parts of Manhattan because Soho was not Soho anymore as they're depicting it. But, like, you know, the crime rate in New York is, I think, at its peak in 1985, more or less.
Right.
So it's like, the walking home at night thing is kind of like, you know, it's not the most dangerous part of town necessarily, but it's like, there's a good argument that, like, you wouldn't necessarily want to go somewhere you don't know at, which I think 4 a.m.
is probably inherently implied. This is the classic, like, you're now we're watching it 40 years later, right?
Yeah,
and New York is so different. So like, that's probably implied at the time, but it's like, I wish there was more. Like, he never meets any toughs in this movie that really sort of threaten him, which I feel like just something like that would then make all of the sort of what happens afterwards make sense, because you're like, oh, okay, I understand why he can't just
one throwaway line of like, well, I can't do that because why? Could go a long way, sure.
So that's part of it. Another part of it is I read how, like, Scorsese really wanted to make this movie like Hitchcockian, which I don't necessarily see it as that. Like, I do, in the sense that there's like the misunderstanding, of like misunderstood identity kind of situation that's going on, but like not to the same degree in a Hitchcock movie, which is like, the stakes are always so high in those movies, whereas like here it's not the same. But I don't think it succeeds on that level of being Hitchcockian. It never feels Hitchcockian to me in a way that like a Brian De Palma movie does.
Well, I mean, that's like Hitchcock karaoke, though.
Well, I know for sure. But like,
yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the Hitchcock thing a little bit. One of the things that I did see in the research was just, they specifically referenced The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think, like, when I think about that movie in particular, I'm like, okay, I get the connection between those two movies. Not so much other Hitchcock movies, but that movie in particular, it makes sense to me. There's a certain, like, paranoia chase thing going on in that movie that connects to this for me. But the other thing that I think maybe Ballhaus was talking about, or I read it in something in relation to Ballhaus, was there are a lot of cut-ins in this movie of like, you know, you'll be in a scene and then it'll kind of like cut to an object, right?
Yes.
And in Hitchcock movies, usually he's directing your attention to forward the story. That's one of the sort of the classic Hitchcock filmmaking things of like, and then you cut to the doorknob and the doorknob is turning, like that kind of storytelling. And the interesting thing that this movie does that's almost like anti-Hitchcock or deconstructing Hitchcock is it does that and then nothing happens.
Exactly.
And it's sort of like I think it kind of plays on the paranoia aspect of it. Of like, you're looking at this thing and you're like, is that important? I don't know if that's important. Which I kind of appreciate, but it's not Hitchcockian in the kind of like general sense of it. Like when you think of Hitchcock movies and the convention of Hitchcock movies, I would not call this movie Hitchcockian per se.
But I think for me, ultimately, the biggest crime is that by all accounts, everyone refers to this movie as a comedy. And I don't think it's very funny. I think I chuckled, like a sensible chuckle, maybe twice. And probably mostly at the expense of Mr. Cheech and Mr. Chong. But it's interesting. And because I remember that being sort of my takeaway the first time I watched it. And then I was thinking about it the second time. And if you're a listener to the Blank Check podcast, they recently did Spielberg. And they talk about how Spielberg's one of these interesting guys where, like, anytime he tries to make an actual comedy, he fails miserably. But his movies tend to be very funny.
Right.
And Hitchcock was the same way. Famously, Hitchcock's one straight comedy is arguably his worst film.
Sure.
But his movies are all very funny. And I think Scorsese's kind of the same. Like, when he tries to actually do comedy, it doesn't work. But he's a very funny person who uses comedy really, really well in non-comedic stories.
Definitely. I would say Goodfellas or The Departed are way funnier than this movie.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm bumping up against more than anything else. Is just that this is framed as a comedy, that has zero humor. And and even you get again, when Catherine O'Hara, who I forgot was in this movie, when she comes on, I lit up. I was like, okay, this is going to be the moment where it turns around for me.
Right.
One of the funniest actors of their generation, Catherine O'Hara. She is going to come on screen and she's going to save this for me. And absolutely does not. It isn't given the opportunity to do the Catherine O'Hara thing. I'm not saying she's bad in the movie, but it's just she didn't save it for me. So it's just, I think that's my big thing, is just maybe it ultimately comes down to the whole walkabout, you wanted cake but you got pie, and it's good pie but it's not cake. I don't know if that's what it is, but it's just this movie just doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah. Okay, so let me give you my rebuttal.
Please.
Up front. So the reason why this movie is so my shit is because one of the things that I think film does best is kind of mimic the logic of dreams, right? And not in a metaphorical way, in a very literal way of oh, this feels like a dream, right? Because the conventions of Hollywood in particular, right, makes you feel like film is so seamless, right? It's reality, even though in fact you're cutting between two different shots and all this sort of stuff. It papers over all of that through these conventions that we're all very used to.
Yes.
But if you exploit that, you can then make these weird things happen where your brain is kind of being wait a second, I thought that this was happening. And you're drawing weird connections that life doesn't give you and other art forms don't give you in the same way. It's kind of a little bit disorienting, but then also thought-provoking, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of my favorite movies are kind of in this vein, right?
100%.
So Once Upon a Time in America is a perfect example of this, where it's jumping around in time in weird ways, and things happen in that movie where you're did that actually happen? Or is this some kind of weird dream? Or he's projecting into the future because he's high, or who the hell knows, right? Or Being John Malkovich, another movie I love, which is very dreamlike. And has all sorts of really bizarre stuff in it. I think actually the humor is kind of comparable between those two movies, where it's that movie's not necessarily laugh out loud funny all the time, but it's so uncomfortable sometimes that it makes you laugh. Right. Because you're kind of I don't know what else to do. and this movie for me has some moments like that, more so than jokes.
Right.
So anyways, that's a big part of why it's my sort of shit. The vibe of it is really what gets me going. The kind of world it creates. The most obvious example that kind of runs through this whole thing is Paul's tonsillectomy story. He tells this story when he's giving Kiki a massage, right?
When I was a kid, I had my tonsils taken out, and after the operation, they didn't have enough room in pediatrics, so they had to put me in the burn ward.
Blindfold him.
Yeah, they have to move him to the burn ward, but he doesn't know it's the burn ward. And they the nurse puts a blindfold on him and takes him to the burn ward, and then he doesn't get to finish the story because Kiki falls asleep. But you can kind of guess what's going to happen, which is, he takes the blindfold off and sees all these burn victims and is scarred forever. And so there's this sort of whole motif throughout this that makes no sense of he's just constantly being encountered with situations where burns come up, right? Marcy, the girl who he likes, it's she has burn cream and she has a book of burn victims. And there's maybe this sort of idea that maybe she's covered in scars, but you do see her mostly nude at one point and she has no scars.
Well, that is maybe my favorite moment in the film.
Yeah.
But it just, again, it's it doesn't go anywhere, but it's the kind of thing that Chris Nolan would do something like this. Memento is a perfect example of this, where in an early scene, you see a scar on her leg, and then after she's died, he checks, and it's a tattoo.
Right.
But you very it, and it's very clearly if you were to go back and compare the two images, it's very clearly two different things. It's not we saw part of the tattoo and it looked like a scar. And that's Scorsese playing with his dream logic, playing with what you thought you saw versus what you really saw and stuff like that. And
even the tattoo that is there
makes no sense.
It's kind of a thing where you're is he just connecting the dots in his head, or is this actually a real thing? Because the implication is that the bartender he met in a different context is her boyfriend because he has a keychain that has the same skull wearing a top hat that's in her tattoo, and he must be the guy she was talking about when she says that like her ex-boyfriend was obsessed with the Wizard of Oz, and all of this crazy stuff that like just it seems like it's true, but like maybe not. Like at one point he smokes something and he's like, this doesn't seem like weed, so like who knows, right? Is he just completely high and paranoid at this point? It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm curious if you got a kick out of any of those sort of like weird dreamlike things, or if they're just like, they don't do anything for you.
Well, again, I think I like the tattoo scar thing. It just doesn't go anywhere. Like there's no payoff.
But I think that's the whole thing.
And I think we have to also address the fact, because I did a little bit of research on this, that they had no idea how to end this movie. And they basically brought in, is it Michael Powell, like of Powell and Pressburger, who ends up marrying Thelma Schoonmaker, the editor, this legendary filmmaker that Martin Scorsese like idolizes, and sort of says like, what do we do with the ending here? And that's eventually how they get to this ending of he ends up being like dumped out of the statue in front of his workplace. And it's sort of come full circle, which I still don't think is a particularly satisfying ending. And that's fine. Like maybe it's not about being satisfied. Like, I have to get over that. But I think that's what it ultimately comes down to, is like these sort of moments of dream logic don't really ever have a final payoff that sort of feels like it makes clear its case for what it's trying to say. And it just sort of like fizzles out for me at the end.
Yeah, I think I disagree with that in the sense that like a couple things. I think that like a lot of this movie is about paranoia. And so like the fact that it doesn't come to anything doesn't necessarily bother me, because it's like paranoia often doesn't come to anything. And it's like,
that's fair.
Really this sort of escalation of his feeling of being attacked and surrounded, and not just physically, but in terms of like his whole life. Like, I don't know if you caught, like at one point I had to go back and rewatch this because I didn't catch it totally the first time, or I wasn't sure the first time. But when he's running away at one point, he goes up to an apartment and he starts pressing the buttons. And did you catch who he's trying to get to?
No.
It's his parents.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like I heard... Well, yeah, because he calls out mom, but see, my thinking there was that he was just trying to get in, and so he was pushing random buttons and saying mom, thinking that, oh, if someone hears someone call, like maybe. A mother hears that... Well, I see... Okay, fair enough.
But this is the thing, is that it's like, that might be true, totally, and I think that's a totally fair reading, but like, if it's true that his parents are there, it totally like flips this whole thing on its head, where it's like, you think at the beginning of the movie he's like an uptown yuppie who's coming downtown to Soho, the weird artsy area, and he doesn't know anything about Soho. But in fact, if you sort of take what he's saying there at face value, he grew up in Soho, maybe. Right. Or he knows Soho at least because his family lives there, and he knew all of the neighbors, supposedly, right? So it's like...
But then why would he care of being trapped there?
Exactly. Because if you think about the burn ward thing too, it's not that he's surrounded by strange stuff. It's that he's surrounded by all the stuff that's eating away at his deepest, darkest secrets that are inside him, that are actually his past and his life, and not like someone else's weird stuff. It's all his weird stuff.
Right.
Like that scene where Catherine O'Hara is like peeling the news story off of his body and like reading it, and it's like about a man being torn apart by a mob in Soho, and then she's like, don't worry, I'll just burn it off, and then he's like, I'm getting the f*** out of here. Like it's all just wrapped up in his own shit, I think. Is the big thing. And to me, that's how it escalates. It kind of goes through this phase of like his little yuppie life and like meeting this girl and going and trying to find her, and it kind of like gets weirder and weirder. And it starts out being like, oh, all these weird people in Soho. And to me, it gets more and more personal as it goes on. And the ending is weird, undoubtedly. And they definitely did not know how to end it. But I do kind of like it. I don't really know what it means, but I do kind of like it.
I don't know. It's just like, it's one of those things of like, once I read that they didn't know how to end the movie, I was like, well, that is very obvious to me.
To be fair, they did have an ending. It's just that audiences didn't respond well to it.
Right.
So it's like in the original ending, Cheech and Chong, we'll have to go way back to explain it. But like he in order to escape this mob that's chasing him, he finds this woman who turns him into a sculpture, basically, wraps him in plaster.
Yeah.
And the people come and they can't find him because they think it's just a sculpture. And then Cheech and Chong steal him because they're these thieves in this movie that had previously stolen some art. So you kind of know that's their deal.
Well, but he claims that he bought the art. And
it's all very confusing.
Yes.
But so
I wonder why I don't like this movie, Nate.
So he gets stolen by Cheech and Chong. And in the original ending, they just steal him and they drive away. And that's the end of the movie. But then the audience, when they showed it to audiences, the audience was like, but what happened to Paul?
Right.
And so they're like, oh shit, we've like left people with a bad taste in their mouth. We have to fix it.
Well,
and that's when they were like, now what do we do? So,
yeah. I don't know that they like, I mean, I guess that's better, but like, it's still not great. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the actors in this film, because again, it's not a bad film. They're all really good performances.
So I actually had just like a kind of general thing about the cast of characters, kind of building on the crew comment, which is like, it is still this very small New York world, which I thought was fascinating. And in one of the interviews I was reading, Rosanna Arquette just said that a lot of the actors were just people who hung out at Cafe Central in New York, which was just this like kind of famous New York spot where, Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken hung out. Bruce Willis was a bartender. And they were just, it's a small world.
New York, it's why it's one of the coolest cities in the world. And like the idea of New York in the 80s, like what an incredible time to be alive. And yeah, you could just like walk into a bar and here's all these like, I mean, they probably weren't as famous at the time, but still like this is just out, they're all hanging out together. It's very cool. That to me is cooler than the movie itself. But
yeah, it is this sort of like time capsule of that moment in time of like all these people that came together for this. But yeah, let's talk about Griffin Dunne as Paul. I love Griffin Dunne. I think.
So I was going to say, like, what are you familiar with Griffin Dunne outside of this? Like,
I mean, certainly from American Werewolf in London,
which he's so good in that movie.
He's so great, and this role is very much in that vein to me. The role's kind of flipped, I guess, but
I remember seeing American Werewolf in London and just being sort of struck by how great he was, and being like, why is this guy not in?
Yeah.
More stuff, like what happened to him? Because like I hadn't really seen him in anything else, and then obviously I saw this, and I was like, that was my immediate. I was like, oh, that's the guy from American Werewolf. But like, I don't know what his career ended up being after this, or like maybe he's just in a bunch of 80s movies that I'm not familiar with. But like, he's not
on a lot of TV.
Fair.
That's usually the answer. He's working hard. He's just doing TV.
But he's so great as this like fish out of water character, but also has like these great comedic chops, which like, again, he more gets to showcase in American Werewolf. But yeah, he's so good.
He's in Only Murders in the Building.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
He plays kind of an interesting pivotal role. He's only in a couple episodes, but he's in that.
Now I'm pulling up his IMDb to see. Okay, so he's in Dallas Buyers Club, apparently.
Yeah. He's in a lot of prestige TV.
He's in Ocean's 8 as parole board officer. So yeah, like it looks like a lot of like these filmmakers like him and put him in sort of like cameo roles.
Yeah, I think he's kind of a character actor. He's sort of evolved into a character actor role mostly.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. Well, he's in Quiz Show as a count guy.
He plays himself in Stuck on You.
Cool. Yeah, it's just, I mean, I think it's one of those like classic careers of just like he popped early and then couldn't really find or shake that association or whatever, and became typecast or kind of fell out of fit. Like, it's funny because I always feel like he and Kyle MacLachlan could have had like weird parallel. Like, he's very much a Kyle MacLachlan type to me.
Sure.
But like Kyle MacLachlan gets Twin Peaks and then does all the Lynch stuff. But like, I don't know. I feel like there's a parallel universe where like all of those roles went to this guy instead.
Yeah. And I think like the thing that's worth noting too is like, even by this point, the reason why he's producing movies is because he was not getting the roles he wanted.
Right.
And so like their production company, Amy Robinson too, same boat. They started it partly so that they could, potentially get some roles, but also so that they had like a different way to engage with like film work. Totally. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of a shame because I really like him. I think he's just so damn charming.
Rosanna Arquette is this, of course, like she's one of the Arquettes,
Yep.
got a famous career family. The dad, and then her brother and sisters. I don't think I've seen her in anything else.
No, me neither.
But I mean,
again, like the bridge to Desperately Seeking Susan. Right?
Yeah.
But like, I haven't seen that movie, and
me neither.
I don't think I've seen her in much else either.
But she's really good. Like, it's
interesting.
You don't like
think
her?
She's the weak link.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Personally, I like a lot of the side character roles, and I like Linda Florentino, who we'll talk about in a moment as well. But I actually didn't love Marcy in this.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. I guess I just felt like she was maybe a little bit generic for that type of role for me. And maybe that's a writing issue. That's also possible.
Right.
She is kind of like this manic pixie dream girl who gone awry type thing.
Fair, but I guess for me, it's like I also can understand why this guy sort of is infatuated with her enough to go on this crazy journey and then, sort of get in over his head, but like not be able to totally shake it. And like she leaves enough of an impression, even if her character is maybe a bit thin, which is maybe, again, to the dream logic thing, is maybe intentional, is that she's meant to be a Hitchcock ice queen and like not be totally fleshed out. This is the problem,
and also,
right?
Like you self-contradictory, right? Like,
yeah,
she tells you all sorts of things and you don't actually know what's true and what's not. And like, even again, your eyes deceive you about like what she's told you and what the truth is in the movie. So it's sort of like, you're right. She may be intentionally a character that you project things onto. But
compared to her roommate, Kiki.
Yeah.
Which is that whole run for me was just like, what is going on here?
Which part?
Like, well, like there's the whole, like she's doing the art, and then there's the massage, and then like she comes back later and she's like topless and just like, it's just like, I'm like, what is happening here? Like, it's, And obviously this illusion of like, oh, I came for the one girl, but now maybe I'm more interested in the roommate.
Right.
So I'm going to try and like get with her.
Which we all know is a bad idea.
Horrible idea.
But that's the whole thing, I think, is it's just like you're watching him be like, what are you doing? You're waiting for this other girl to come back. You're like giving this woman a massage. What are you thinking? Like,
he's thinking menage. He's
use
thinking
your upper head.
Yeah, he wants to be a George Costanza with the menage. But,
there is a funny story about the massage scene that I have to tell you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So Scorsese told Dunn that he could not have sex for the entire 8-week shoot.
Okay.
And Dunn's like, yeah, sure, no problem. But the weekend before this scene, where he's supposed to give the massage, he ends up hooking up with someone that he meets at a club. And so this is what Dunn said happened on set. In the first take, I'm massaging her neck like I'm Pepe Le Pew. I'm so relaxed and so sort of sexy and seductive. And Marty goes, cut. Griffin, come here. He pulled me aside and said, did you get laid? You ruined this whole scene. You f***ed up this whole scene, maybe the whole f***ing movie. I trusted you.
Oh, no.
It's the only time I ever saw him really angry, and I confessed. I said, I'm so sorry. Let me do it again. And it turns out that the look of fear in one's eyes looks pretty similar to the look of lust. Good old Catholic shame kicked in, and the scene went on as planned.
I don't know, man. Like, tonally, this scene is just like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, is this a comedy? Like, I don't know. I think this is what it comes down to. Is just like, it's tonally, this movie is so weird and kind of its own thing that's what I'm bumping up against, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think like the thing with Kiki that I'm picking up on is just like, you don't know whether to be attracted to her or be afraid of her.
Mm-hmm.
Because she does these things that are unpredictable.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scenes of him like sitting in the room in the dark alone, listening to Kiki and Marcy whisper on the other side of the door. And it sounds like they're talking kind of about him or about the situation. And you don't really know what's going on.
Well, and there's the phone call where she's like, I'm not going to tell him. You invited him here. And
Right. And it's all very mysterious and doesn't totally amount to anything. But it does make sense. Like that part actually does have a payoff in the sense of like, he realizes that he was being paranoid and comes back to apologize, and then she's killed herself. Marcy has killed herself. And so, like,
or
that's
has
kind of
she?
Has she not?
Well, you're the one telling me that we don't necessarily believe what's happening on screen. So, like, did he imagine all that?
I mean, hard to say.
I guess
that seems like it was real-ish.
Right.
There's no indication, I guess, that was fake. But yeah, like there's definitely a lot of stuff in this where you're like, I don't know, should I trust this? So anyways, I like Linda Fiorentino in this. I think she serves the role really well and is able to, like, for me, captures the tone of being like, you know, she's flirtatious, but she's also like mysterious and standoffish and is like inviting him to do weird things. Like when he first comes in, she's like, can you just like finish this artwork for me?
Yeah.
And he's like, what? What do you mean?
Then you won't have made it.
Yeah. He's very confused, but like she's always trying to get him off balance throughout all of the scenes where they're together, including even like showing up topless at the door. It's not really sexy. It's kind of like, wait, what? What's happening? Like,
well,
is this?
Yeah, there's
what
an
are you trying to do?
that she's into like BDSM or something like that, and so I think that's meant to be as like a power move of like, I'm in charge here, wiener boy. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Adam, there's a huge cast of side characters in this movie. Who stood out to you? So here's just a list I'm going to give you. Okay. Verna Bloom as June, who's like an older lady that he meets. He meets a lot of ladies throughout the night.
He does.
Terry Garr as Julie, also known as Ms. Beehive 1965. John Hurd as Tom the bartender, who apparently when he has sex yells, "Surrender, Dorothy," when he comes.
Yeah.
Will Patton as Horst, who is Kiki's like BDSM boyfriend.
Yep.
Robert Plunkett as Street Pickup. This like, oh my God, this like poor guy who's got some serious Smithers vibes, who thinks that he is picking up Paul.
Yes.
And he's like, I've never done this before. He's very sweet. And then of course he gets more than he bargained for. We got Larry Block as the ornery taxi driver. Victor Argo as diner cashier, Murray Moston as subway attendant, Clarence Felder as bouncer, Martin Scorsese as searchlight operator in the club.
Yeah, I did catch that.
Yeah, and then of course we have Catherine O'Hara, the great Catherine O'Hara, Cheech and Chong.
I think my favorite, maybe it's because it's like the most coherent and like, you know, closed loop narrative, is Tom the bartender.
Yeah.
I think I really like that sequence and that story beat.
Totally.
And sort of this idea of like, he's been asked to go do this guy a favor and then he sort of forgets about it and then he goes back and then it's like a series of compounding incidents and all this stuff. But
gives his keys as like insurance and then the guy closes the bar and then comes back later and there's just totally.
And when he's trying to like open the cash register and he's like beating it up and it's just, I don't know. It's, that whole sequence worked really, really nicely for me. Terry Garr, like, I really like her as an actor and I think there's some interesting stuff there, but it just kind of doesn't go, I don't know. It's just,
that was probably one of my least favorite parts. It felt a little extra.
Yeah, and as I said, even Catherine O'Hara, like it becomes funny that she then starts leading this mob with her.
I like the Catherine O'Hara stuff.
Mr. Softy.
Catherine O'Hara.
Yeah, exactly. Like anytime she's on screen, it's not a bad thing. But by that point, the movie has sort of like lost me. Part of it is that I'm hoping that she's going to come in and be this sort of like comedic uplift that this movie so desperately needed for me, and she's not.
She's actually another scary person who's kind of like doing things, kind of playing games with him that he doesn't want to play.
Yeah.
And like is kind of unpredictable. Like every time he's trying to have a conversation with her, she's just like answering with non sequiturs about how she works for Mr. Softy and drives a truck.
And is genuinely kind of menacing by the end. Like
totally.
When the mob is hunting for him and she's sort of leading that charge, is threatening and menacing in a way that, you know, you don't necessarily expect from Moira from Schitt's Creek.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a very dreamlike kind of way where it's like, you don't expect a mob riding a Mr. Softy truck to be scary, but it feels like a nightmare. Like you're like, oh my God, like everything's gone off the rails, you know?
And I guess that is this whole thing about the movie. Like when I started to think about it more, I was like, you know, if I did find myself in this situation of being trapped downtown, as it were, I guess that would be kind of scary.
Yeah.
But I almost wish, I guess that's the other thing too, is that I don't think the movie isn't funny enough to tick that sort of like comedy box, but it's also not like a thriller or like scary. It's not like The Game where it's like, you know, Michael Douglas is, you know, finds himself in this precarious situation that he just can't seem to escape and tension build. Like, I wouldn't describe this movie as featuring tension, despite there being this underlying issue that he's trying to deal with. And I think that's where it sort of just, it doesn't work for me, is that it's not delivering on the premise of comedy, and it's not delivering on the premise of trapped in downtown New York.
Yeah.
And it's just like this series of vignettes that are kind of, dream logic-y, but...
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. It doesn't feel dangerous, really. To me, it feels more like No Exit, right? It feels like you're trapped in hell, and like you want to get out, but like you can't really get out, and it may be because of your circumstance that you can't get out, or maybe it's because of you. Like there's kind of that sort of vibe to this, but it is much more like existential, or maybe a bit of paranoia, or like nightmare sort of logic, but not like they're gonna kill me. Like you don't ever really feel like he's in physical danger per se, but more just like he keeps getting in worse trouble. It is that kind of like a lot of like dreamlike scenarios where it's like, oh, I lost my keys, right? Or like he witnesses a murder at one point and is like, this was one laugh out loud moment for me, was he witnesses the murder and he says,
I'll probably get blamed for that.
Yes, I did. I did write that joke down, and I did like that. He sort of breaks the fourth wall.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. I really like the diner cashier, actually.
Okay, yeah.
Just because like when they go into the diner, he's still with Rosanna Arquette at that point, and they're like talking, but like the diner owner knows her and like knows her by name and is kind of acting weird and like winking at her. And as they're walking out, he kind of like walks towards Griffin Dunn in this like menacing way, and then later Griffin Dunn tries to like trick the diner guy into letting him use the bathroom, and he orders a burger and coffee. And is like, don't worry, I'm just like feeding the meter. I'll be right back. And he runs away. And then through, of course, a series of like strange events, he ends up back in the diner to meet the bartender. He sees the bartender. He goes in. He's like, oh, great. I need your help. And as he sits down to the bartender, he gets served the coffee and the burger.
Yeah.
And like the diner guy doesn't comment on it at all. Like he isn't like, you ran away. He just hands it to him. Yeah. And it's like just one of those like weird, surreal moments that happens that I thought that was a nice payoff as well.
I guess we can cut this out too, but it's just like the other thing too is like, why are all these people around at this late at night? Like, because I think it's implied it's like 2 or 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I guess like, again, this is maybe just because I'm not a New Yorker. Like where I live, basically the city shuts down at like 11.
Yeah.
So the idea that like people are starting their nights at 2 a.m. and there are all these people like I get like an all-night diner being open, but these bars that are still open.
Oh, bars are definitely open in New York pretty late.
Okay.
Because there's no like, the curfew might be pretty late. The other thing to know is like, the subway's open 24 hours a day.
Right.
So
which
there
it's
is
not in Toronto.
Right. So there's this sort of feeling of like, well, the city doesn't have to shut down because you can get typically, unless you're in after hours, you can get where you need to go. But I felt like
and again, that's why I do think that is part of what I'm also bumping up against, is just like, this is so outside like my lifestyle. Like,
sure,
I never would have done any of this stuff. I can't relate to anything that's occurring.
Yeah. Whereas I am a little bit more maybe of a Paul type guy.
I
was at one point.
Yeah, I think of University Nate. Certainly, I could see getting himself into a couple of these sort of, staying out late with a girl at Cherry Beach.
Right.
Or something, like before you met your wife.
So I can relate. Yes, exactly. Before I met my wife.
And then she domesticated you a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, well, Adam, what about the visual language of this movie? Is there anything about that turned your crank?
I mean, there's a little bit of that neon noir Michael Mann look to the exterior night stuff, which, we'll get to it when we talk about our recommendations, but you can't help but be drawn to seeing 70s and 80s New York on screen. Always just, I think it's so cool. Like, even when New York was a dive and a dump and just riddled with graffiti and trash, and there's just something inherently kind of cool about that. But I think that's the other thing that kind of doesn't do it for me here, is that I don't think this is a particularly visually striking film.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I love the aesthetic of this film.
I think there are interesting moments. Like there's, obviously like the keys dropping thing is cool.
Yeah.
Although, of course, it's immediately what I start thinking of Rent, which tells you everything you need to know about who I am. And there's the cool overhead shot when he like breaks through the door.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple little moments of visual flair, but like this doesn't feel as showy as I know that Scorsese can maybe be.
Right.
It's funny, like now I keep thinking about The Game because there's some parallels to the core of that story.
Right.
And how like that movie is, I mean, it's David Fincher, but like there's so much like visual juice there.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't really have, I feel like this is, there's more than like a traditional comedy and how we've talked about like, the like proscenium, set up the camera and just let things unfold. Like there is definitely artistry going on. But I don't know. So when I was working at TIFF, we did a Scorsese retrospective and I had to cut the trailer for it. And I started with all the films that like immediately there's like, you got to use that iconic shot. You got to use that iconic shot. You got to use that iconic shot. And I was like, I got to put something from After Hours in. What's the iconic shot from After Hours?
Yeah, I get that. The most impressive visual stuff about this movie, I think, is more about the production design and less about the cinematography. In some ways, Bauhaus and Scorsese are maybe building together the thing that they're then going to do better in future movies because this is their first collaboration. But
and I think you also, when you talked about the Hitchcock connection and the idea of like how Hitchcock would like show the doorknob to this is going to be meaningful, and they're sort of playing with that expectation.
Right.
There are moments like that. I mean, there's the numerous shots of the statues that are very disturbing and eerie. And then all the stuff in the bar has this very sort of like grungy New York underground, which again, I'm going to come back to that when we talk about our recommendations for further viewing. But yeah, like I said, it's not bad. It's not an ugly movie. It's just, I expect more from, like, I think about Goodfellas and like all of the like, all of the like crazy visual language that, and I'm not saying that this movie needed a one-er or anything, but it's just like, it feels a little safe. But again, knowing where Scorsese's head is, maybe that's a bit more intentional.
Yeah, I think it might actually just be a resource question, like in terms of budget and time to actually like accomplish some of those things. But I do think that there are some interesting things. Like, I mean, the opening and the closing of this movie has these dolly shots that are like so fast.
Yeah.
Like the camera is just moving at a clip. Like through this office space in a way that like I can't really think of other movies that have a dolly shot that fast in them.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't look like it's sped up or anything. It's just they're just
they're just moving really, really, really quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is one of the things that I maybe clocked more than the visuals of this is the sonics of this movie. I think I really like Howard Shore's score. And I think the sound,
very distinctive.
The sound design in this is really good too. Like I think I was more intrigued by that than I was by anything I was like seeing on screen.
Yeah, I feel like the thing that stood out to me was definitely like all of these distinct sets. And, like when we were doing Bram Stoker's Dracula, one of the things we talked about was like the stripped down sets in that movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like they're almost like stage sets.
Yeah.
And like there are a lot of spaces in this movie that have that vibe where it's like you go into like Kiki's loft, for example, and it's like it's just kind of like
empty
black space with like some pillars and then like sheets of plastic. It's very abstract, right? Like it doesn't actually feel like a real place. It just feels like a dream, right?
Yeah. And then, like, I also am like, how can she afford this apartment as a,
it's
an artist?
It's Soho.
So I mean, and this is me not knowing the New York thing. Like, that's a believable thing that you could be a working artist? And
not in 1985, but in the 1970s, totally believable.
Okay.
Like this is basically, it's like the classic gentrification story where it was like seen as like a totally undesirable place. It was industrial, and I believe it was zoned as industrial, which means you're technically not allowed to live there.
Right.
Then all these artists live there anyways, and they eventually are given a new zoning status, which is like a live-work status that formalizes their presence there. And that's kind of like how Soho becomes Soho.
Okay.
And then, of course, like once everyone knows about the art scene there, it attracts all this investment and other stuff starts happening and it becomes a fancy area. But like that's sort of happening right when this is shot in the 80s.
Okay.
And like, you know, a few years prior, it was still kind of like young and hip and up and coming.
Right.
So at one time, it's kind of like a fantasy Soho, even at the time that they shot this. But there was a time when this would have been fairly believable.
Right.
And like to anyone outside of New York, you probably still would think it's believable. So anyway, those spaces I find really interesting. Like it's the same with when he goes to the bartender's apartment. It's just like there's like a mannequin, an iguana in a tank, and then like his toilet is full of like blue liquid that then he flushes it and it overflows.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that where it's just like this weird mishmash of stuff. And I was reading like some interesting things about the production design. So number one, apparently to kind of reflect the paranoia, Townsend asked all of the fabricators to make things that you couldn't tell whether it was furniture or not.
Okay. Yeah.
So basically like, can I sit on that or is that art? Like that kind of vibe to kind of make you feel uncomfortable and make Paul feel uncomfortable, which I thought was really, really smart. And then the other thing that was really interesting that I only noticed once I read it and then I went back and looked for it is that his sort of thesis was that the cab ride is sort of the original sin of the night. And so yellow and black checkers actually run through the whole production design of the movie.
Oh, interesting.
And so like for example, Catherine O'Hara's outfit is yellow, right?
Right.
And so anyways, there's this sort of like interesting dreamlike production design throughout the whole movie that was mostly the thing that I picked up on. Like I would agree that certainly like the film moves and the montage, all of that stuff doesn't feel quite as impressive as some of the other Martin Scorsese movies, but I felt like overall it just creates a really cohesive world,
right?
You know, which is why like it's hard to like pick out one moment and be like, that's the magic moment. It's really more this sort of like coherent world that it creates that I find exciting.
Right. Interesting.
Well, Adam, should we talk about the ending a little more?
Yeah, I mean, as flawed as it is, I feel like we kind of should unpack that.
Yeah. So we already kind of said a little bit of like what the original ending was, right? Paul wasn't going to escape from his plaster cocoon and just be taken away by Cheech and Chong. But instead, in the end, right, he does get dropped off in front of his office where we start the movie, and his cocoon cracks, and he like is able to go back inside to his office, and he sits down covered in plaster, and then the camera starts moving around really rapidly, just like in the beginning. And that's kind of the end of the movie. Totally get why you don't find it satisfying. It resolves things in the sense of like his goal was to get out of Soho, and he gets out of Soho. But like all the things that happened in the interim don't kind of come back in a meaningful way at the end to be like, oh, okay. Like, you know, The Game is a great alternative take on this where it's like, and then someone explains what was happening.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, cool. I get it. As an audience member in the game, you can then go back and think through all the things that happened in the movie and be like, oh, okay, I see what was happening there.
Right.
And there's definitely no legend on a map to kind of help you unpack what you're looking at. It's just always going to be uncomfortable and unresolved. But yeah, as you were saying, like when they showed the original ending to audiences, they didn't like it. And Scorsese invited, some of his friends, Brian De Palma, Steven Spielberg, and Michael Powell to come and like check out the movie and like brainstorm alternative endings with him. Did you get a chance to see any of the other alternative endings?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So let me tell you a couple because they are absolutely f***ing wild. Okay, so we didn't really talk that much about June, but she's this like older woman that Paul runs into near the end of the movie.
Yeah.
He goes back to this club where like an hour earlier there was like a giant mosh pit full of punks that try to shave his head into a mohawk.
Yeah.
And he goes back an hour later, it's completely empty.
Yeah.
It looks like a completely different space. There's just like a bartender there and then a woman sitting at this table, and he like goes and has a conversation with her and asks her to dance, and they like hang out, and she's kind of this maternal figure. So one of the alternative endings that was proposed by the screenwriter was that June would be like, Paul, I'll hide you. And then she'd open her legs and Paul would climb inside her womb. And then she would go to the West Side Highway and give birth to him on the street.
Yeah, glad that didn't happen.
Yeah. So they were like, yeah, okay, maybe that works. And they took it to
that works.
And they took it to one of the producers, and the producer was like, have you all lost your minds?
Like, this movie is not that surreal. Like, it would just, that
would be an escalation.
Yeah, that
sure.
would break the movie.
Okay, so here's another one. And this also came actually from Michael Powell, so this is interesting. He was like, well, what if Paul escaped in a hot air balloon? and he would just kind of float over the city, and he'd look out over it, and it would suddenly be boring. And Scorsese later said, it was one of those ideas that you come up with when you're really desperate, and it feels like you've struck gold for about 9 seconds, and then it's over. Now, here's the interesting thing. That is how the episode of The Simpsons Desperately Seeking Lisa ends.
Oh.
She escapes on a parade float.
Right.
Over the city. So I'm very curious, again,
if that was intentional.
When we talk to Matt Selman in the past, in the future, we will have to ask him whether that's indeed a reference to the alternative ending to After Hours or just a total coincidence.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of interesting.
That feels more like a Terry Gilliam-esque ending.
Yes, totally. And I think this movie was a little inspired by The Wizard of Oz as well.
Right.
So that also feels like an homage to The Wizard of Oz.
Totally.
So yeah, those are the alternative endings. So do any of them appeal to you a little better than what we got? Or is this...
No, they're all bad. They're all bad.
I mean, I like the ending they chose best.
I mean, yes, it's of the options, it's the best one, but I still don't think it's necessarily that satisfying. But
yeah, to me, it's kind of thought-provoking because it sort of feels like, okay, so he goes back to work after all this crazy shit happens. And in some ways, it's kind of like, is that just him like going back to safety? This is a classic, whatever it is, hero of 1,000 faces sort of thing, right? The way these stories are supposed to work is you go to a crazy place and then you come back with new skills and an understanding of the world. Paul doesn't do that, right? Paul escapes by the skin of his teeth and then he ends up back in the office. And you get the impression that basically nothing has changed for him, right? Except maybe he's like learned to not go to Soho.
Yeah.
Or maybe not go back to Soho if you believe that he grew up there, right? But yeah, so it's like in that sense, it doesn't feel satisfying. Like he's grown as a character. He's just survived.
Well, and again, I think that strikes me. It's one of these, I famously don't like movies to be long, but I feel like maybe if there was more about like his work life to sort of like get an understanding of, it's like the yuppie getting out of his comfort zone. But that's the thing. Like we had that one scene at the office at the beginning where he's like clearly teaching this person how to use, I guess, a word processor or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the scene
why are you doing this to me? I'm just a word processor.
And then he ends the movie just back. Like, again, it's just like, I feel like this movie, it's trying to say something without giving us the pieces that were, I don't know. I think that's what I struggle with. It's just like too much is left to be inferred maybe. And I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think, like, to me, what the ending is sort of about is, like, he's retreating back to safety, but you also know that the safety is boring and insular to him.
But do we know that? Because, like, we haven't seen enough of his internal life in the opening outside of one scene to really know how he feels about his work. Unless, again, it's just this implication of it's the 80s and he's a yuppie and therefore.
I know. I think there's some evidence to it, which is like, so in that opening scene, he's like teaching the guy how to do word processing, I guess, on the computer. But like when the guy then starts being like, here's my dream. I want to do this and I want to do that. Yeah. And Paul's basically like drifting off, looking around the office and kind of like, maybe looking a bit at women, but not like in like a male gazy kind of way, but he's like kind of looking around and like the camera's sort of like wandering, like nothing he's looking at feels important, but it's not focused on the guy who's talking. And then he kind of like looks back at the guy and is like, yeah, totally. Or, whatever. He kind of blows him off and then he like leaves. And then he goes to his apartment, and his apartment is like dark and empty and boring. And the furniture, I would say, is like, looks maybe kind of expensive, like tasteful, but also like there's no personality at all.
Right.
And so like you're kind of reading between the lines, but I think it is there that his life feels kind of empty and unfulfilling. And he doesn't seem happy, I guess, is what I would take away from those scenes, even though they're not saying it explicitly. But then at the end of the movie, he like, you know, runs back into his office without having slept or done anything to refresh himself, just to like get back to work. Yeah. And I think it's a sad ending. I think it's a depressing ending.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think it is kind of saying something. I'm not entirely sure what, other than maybe it's better to be safe and bored than being excited and hunted down by a mob riding a Mr. Softy truck.
Yeah, totally. Well, can't argue with that.
All right, my friend. Should we do the Simpsons speed round?
I think it's time for the Simpsons speed round.
All right, Adam. Are there any moments in this movie that feel like Simpsons jokes but aren't?
So there's the moment when Griffin Dunn runs up to what did you call him? The poor pickup or whatever.
Yes.
The guy on the street, and he's
this
just
Mr. Smithers-like character.
Yes, and he's just sort of a raving lunatic. And it just the thing that jumped into my mind is Fat Guy Homer trying to get a ride back to the power plant. He's like, "Oh, it's gonna be real bad. Oh, you're gonna have to help me. Oh, I'm gonna explode." Right? Like it's just that immediately just jumped into my brain of like,
yes.
If you were to find yourself on the other end of someone having a very, very bad experience, and with the full context, you would obviously want to help them, but you probably wouldn't have that context, and they would just sound like a raving lunatic, and you would probably just run away. Or, I guess in this guy's case, go home with him and try and hook up, but yeah.
He was trying to put himself out there, you know?
Exactly.
Sad thing. Yeah.
Nate, did you learn anything about The Simpsons from this movie?
Not really, I don't think. I mean, this was an interesting parody in that it was so like light touch and like a spiritual parody, not like a direct parody. So that's kind of interesting. Like, you know, there is no like crazed street sweeper in this movie, even though that's how The Simpsons kind of depicts After Hours. But so that was kind of interesting. But other than that, not really.
It is interesting, I would say, though, that nearly 30 years later, they decide to like return to it in a more fulsome manner, as if they're like, "There's more juice here. We can peel away at this grape.
Peel away that juice."
Yeah,
totally. Okay, Adam. Speaking of juice, does this movie still have some juice for more Simpsons parodies?
Well, it's like that's the interesting thing. Had this episode in season 36 not happened, I would say yes, but I think now they've maybe sort of like
juiced it.
They've juiced it. It's juiced.
Yeah, I will say like the One Crazy Night thing is a very malleable setup.
Totally.
That like you could probably like take a little more from this movie in certain ways, but like without doing a full plot thing.
Yeah.
Because it is just like a great setup for a lot of different types of stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any characters in this movie that you think could become a recurring Simpsons side character?
I mean, I said Gail, Mrs. Softy, right? Catherine O'Hara's character.
Yeah.
Just because maybe it's just because I feel like there should be more like female characters on the show that like have I don't know. I feel like I had a similar answer maybe for one of our recent movies too, of like, how about that like crazy lady in this movie who's like...
Well, it's funny. She kind of has like an Edna Krabappel attitude.
That's true.
Like
That's true.
The sort of brassy, like, you know, kind of scary woman in...
Yeah, a little bit of a ball buster.
I could kind of see that. I said Neil and Pepe. I think that they are so cartoonish in this movie that they very much could exist within Springfield.
Yes, Cheech and Chong could just be on The Simpsons. I mean, I think, so one funny thing about them, they apparently, they were sort of like, Martin Scorsese was like, "Oh yeah, I love Cheech and Chong. We should get like a Cheech and Chong type for this role." And then someone was like, "Why don't we get Cheech and Chong?" And that's what they did.
That's what they did.
Okay, Adam, are there other movies by this director that The Simpsons should parody?
So again, it's like if we're talking about around the time of where we sort of make our arbitrary cutoff, I would say like I could see early 2000s Simpsons like doing some stuff with Goodfellas or Casino, because you've got like Fat Tony and like they could do some fun mob stuff. But like,
Fat Tony's from Goodfellas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like,
but they didn't really do a lot with the plot.
No. But that now, like doing a parody of mob stuff is so played out.
Yeah,
that I think like if I'm talking today, I don't necessarily want them to do that. I think it would be interesting to see them sort of tackle some of like the Scorsese music / documentary stuff.
That could be fun.
And like The Last Waltz, I feel like there's even if it's just like ripping off visual language from that film, I think there's some stuff that there's juice there to be to sip on.
Yeah, the sort of gross, the sort of like semi-pretentious like interviews in between the music sets thing.
Yeah, I feel
could
like
be pretty fun.
The way that the B Sharps episode is riffs on Let It Be. I could see like The Last Waltz has opportunities to be riffed on in the right context. I think.
Maybe it's time to bring Spinal Tap back.
Yeah, maybe.
And then you could do a Last Waltz parody.
There you go.
Yeah. I do feel like King of Comedy makes a lot of sense just because you have Krusty.
Yeah.
And you could just cast one of the characters as like an aspiring comedian who wants to like, get Krusty's attention. But like that setup's pretty easy.
At the same time, now that Joker exists, like I don't need any more riffs on fucking Taxi Driver or King of Comedy. Like,
what if they were poking fun at Joker though?
Then maybe I would be okay with it. Yes.
That I could get into because it's not
that I'm more into for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Nate. That brings us to our favorite part of the show. Do the strengths outweigh the weaknesses?
The verdict. Well, I said it's a 5-star masterpiece, so my answer.
I know your
answer. It's just so deeply my stuff. I love. If you like dreamlike movies, this is going to be a movie you probably like. It's just going to transport you into that place, and I definitely would say do not expect it to be a comedy because I don't think it's going to fulfill that expectation. No. There are some moments of comedy, but like it's certainly not any funnier than most Martin Scorsese movies, I would say.
And I wouldn't even like I've seen people listed as dark comedies or black comedies. I don't even think that like Fargo is a black comedy. Like this is doesn't it's I don't think that's a fair, and I guess it speaks to like we really don't have a great term for, I mean the dramedy has come out of like this lack, but like we don't have a term for a movie kind of like this or a show kind of like this. And it's wild that we still haven't really found something any better than dramedy, but that's also
I wouldn't even call
this is not
dramedy has such a specific meaning now in terms of like what our expectations are.
For sure.
That like this is kind of like in that Charlie Kaufman vein. That's like probably the closest an analog I could give is it feels like a Charlie Kaufman movie a little bit. A Charlie Kaufman's probably a little funnier than this actually.
Yeah.
But it has that kind of vibe where it's like it's uncomfortable. Like maybe more than anything, it's a very uncomfortable movie. And a very it makes you feel paranoid. It makes you feel a little confused. But at the same time, like for me, it's got the thing that's coherent about it. For me, is the tone in the world is what carries me through, and some good acting too. Actually,
for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Adam? Have I persuaded you?
I mean, again, it's like I knew going into this it was tough because it was like. Yeah. This isn't a bad movie. Mm-hmm. It's just not my taste, and it would be like if we were covering a Western. Like maybe there's a Western out there that I'll watch and be like, yeah, actually, I really dug that. I mean, I liked Wild Wild West more than I thought I was going to, so anything's possible. But yeah, like I don't know. I think if you go in with the right expectations, maybe that helps. But this is very much not my cup of tea. And it's not that I don't like dream logic. Like I think about a movie, you talk about Charlie Kaufman. I think about like Eternal Sunshine is a movie that I love, but that's because it's very clear when it's playing in that sort of dreamscape landscape. And that is such a visually arresting movie.
Yeah.
That works for me. And I think maybe that's part of this is that maybe if it just leaned a little more into that.
Well, this movie doesn't have rules like that movie has rules.
Yeah.
Like in the sense, as you say, is just like, it's clear when it's doing that and it's clear when it's not doing that.
Yeah.
And this movie's kind of like, I don't know, are we doing that?
Yeah, and I don't like that.
Yeah,
I don't like
fair.
that sort of like, you know, when you have, it's the classic thing of like, it feels like the film, the annoying kids at the film festival that where it's like, no, you just made a bad film, but you're saying, well, I made it intentionally opaque. And it's like, no, you just didn't have an idea. Like it comes across as that to me a little bit. Like if anything or everything could maybe be true or maybe not true, but it's like, that feels like a cop-out to me. Like at the very least, as the filmmaker, you need to know the answer. And I don't necessarily get that from this. So,
well, it was written by a film student. So it's like,
there you go.
It definitely does have a little bit of that like film student vibe, I would say. Yeah.
What about extra credit? This is where I think you can kind of go in some interesting directions. So I'm curious where you take this.
Yeah, definitely. I thought about a lot of different directions for this. I was thinking like, do I pick a One Crazy Night movie? Do I go with like a dream logic-y movie? What I ended up doing is a sort of like alternative history choice. So I would pair this with Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure.
Okay.
Because, of course, Tim Burton was the first choice as director for this movie. They just kind of couldn't get the funding for it.
Right.
And I actually think like this movie and that movie weirdly kind of have a similar tone in a certain way. I mean, again, Pee Wee Herman's funnier.
Yeah.
But like the sort of like, you know, keeping you on your back foot, like what's going to happen. I'm a little uncomfortable. I'm not sure I understand what's going on. Like that, and some dream logic-y stuff too. Like I actually think there's some stuff in common between these two movies. And I'd be really fascinated to kind of watch them back to back and imagine like, what if After Hours was Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure? Right.
I've never seen Pee Wee's Big Adventure, so
oh man.
Now I'm like, well, I don't like this movie, so does that mean I'm not gonna like that movie?
No,
but I feel like
very different.
They're so completely different. But yeah, there's a couple of those like Tim Burton that and Mars Attacks are sort of like the two that I've never seen, but really feel like I should see because I think they might kind of be my jam. So
yeah,
interesting.
I think you would probably like both of them to a certain extent.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so the movie that I keep alluding to that I couldn't stop thinking about and then subsequently watched and thoroughly enjoyed myself is Cruising. Which, I mean, very different subject matter, but again, it was just the sort of like that 80s New York, and it's specifically all the stuff with the punk bar made me just think of all the scenes in the...
Well, and the leather daddies.
Exactly.
There are several leather daddies in this
so it
movie.
made me think of Cruising, and I was like, I need to revisit Cruising. It's been a while. But we've already... You've technically recommended that before on the show, so I do want to give a different recommendation. And that's a movie that I had never seen until this year, finally saw and like loved. And I don't know if you've seen it, Nate, but I feel like it will also kind of be your shit just because you love New York, which is the original taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
have you seen this movie?
I have not. It's been on my watch list forever.
I think so. I watched it like literally like a month or two ago. It's got our boy Walter Matthau. It's got Robert Shaw from Jaws. So there's a lot of crossover with our show, and it's like a great 70s thriller. And yeah, I had heard so many people were in my sort of like, it was like coming up on podcasts I was listening to, and then it was like people I follow on Letterboxd had recently watched it, and then like there was a screening in Toronto, and then so like some film critic people that I follow were talking about it. So I was just like, I gotta finally like sit down and watch this movie. And so I watched it one night, kind of not knowing what to expect. I had seen the remake before, and like it's Tony Scott and John Travolta's in it, and it's kind of forgettable. And so I really didn't know what to expect. But I loved it. It's so I really, the reason I recommend it is because again, it sort of captures New York at this I mean, it's from the 70s, so it's a little earlier, but like it's a great time capsule of New York movie. But it's also just like really, really entertaining, and it's that sort of perfect, taut, tight thriller that just like there's no skin left on the bone. Like it's exactly what you want it to be. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a really fun romp. So yeah, awesome. And I would be very curious to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I should definitely check that out. One other movie that neither of us have seen that I feel like I was thinking about, because we've talked about it on the podcast a bunch, is The Lost Weekend.
Right.
Yeah. Which is, of course, a movie that has been parodied on The Simpsons multiple times. And I feel like must have some similar feeling to this movie. So that's another one that I feel like we should check out at some point, and we can reminisce about that time we watched After Hours.
Exactly. Well, any excuse to watch more Billy Wilder, I guess I'll take it. So
yeah, amen.
On that note, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share this episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you could throw us a couple of bucks to help cover the costs of making this show. Our next episode will actually be our 50th episode, which, like, for us, you know, I know other podcasts are on like 850, but for us, this is a big deal. And so we wanted to do something a little bit special, a little bit different. So we're gonna play our cards a little close to our chest, but we've got something I think kind of fun that we're gonna dig into. But it, you know, you don't have a specific movie to watch for next episode. Yes. Let's put it that way.
It ties into the broader lore of the show if you've been listening for a while.
Exactly.
Something that is near and dear to Adam's heart, and something that I have never really experienced before. And we're going to talk a hell of a lot about like how it all ties into The Simpsons. Yes. So we're going to be talking about a lot of movies next week or next time around. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And until then, Nate,
we'll see you around the place.
We'll see you around the place. All right. There we go. 2 hours and 37 minutes on a movie I don't even really like.
We did it.
We did it. We did it.
I think it's kind of a shame because I really like him. I think he's just so damn charming in this and in American Werewolf in London. And
holy shit. His dad is Dominic Dunn.
Who's Dominic Dunn?
As soon as you see this guy, you're going to be like, oh, that guy. He's like I want to say like a New York intellectual writer guy. Always wrote for like Vanity Fair.
Nope, no idea.
Really? Okay, weird. This is just like one of those weird Adam things, I guess. We can cut all of this out, but yeah, Dunn was a freaking contributor of Vanity Fair. Yeah, so that's why I know him, because my dad got Vanity Fair and I read a lot of Vanity Fair in high school.
There you go.
But anyway, okay, well, there you go.
Fascinating. Could put that at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, so